Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by Trainer Road. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee. Our head coach, Chad Zimmerman, is not with us. So instead, we have Cliff Bar Racing and Trainer Road's Pete Morris.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Pete.
It's the best. This is one of my favorite things I get to do.
We like having you. It's pretty great. And our CEO, Nate Pearson.
Hello.
How you doing, Nate?
Good. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. You look like you're looking for something frantically.
I am.
Oh, okay.
So just keep talking. I'll find it.
Okay, sounds good. You can see what Nate would be looking for if you go on to youtube.com/trainerroad. You can join us every week live. It's usually Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific. It's a fun time. You can join all the other podcast listeners that are on live in the live chat, ask questions, get answers, and possibly even see what we're talking about here when we talk about things. So you should join us on there. And if you're listening on any podcast app, you can share and review on that, and that would do us a huge favor. First things first, something to share. We put up a pretty cool tool here, and kudos to Dom, one of a very fast triathlete and cyclist who also works here for Trainer Road, an awesome designer. And he built a strength training for cyclists calculator. So if you think back to a handful of months ago, we kind of put out, or we did put out strength training recommendations, kind of like benchmarks where we feel like this is a good idea to be, if you're this sort of rider, having these sort of, or this level of strength is a good idea.
Yeah. The idea is like, when should I stop building and when can I just maintain?
Because that was a common question.
Yeah, exactly. Like when do I stop, or not stop, but when do I like not focus on just increasing my lifts every week? So we have climber, all-rounder, and sprinter. And some in the forum, just because you can do the weight of a sprinter doesn't mean you're a sprinter.
Yes.
Or just because you can do the weight of a climber, which is probably pretty easy, means that you're a climber. But if you're strong enough to do these sprinting things, we think that maybe you don't need to then, I don't know, like for me, the deadlift's like 270 pounds for 5 reps. I don't need to go up to 400 or 500 or 700. I'm not ever do that, but
You're strong enough right now.
now I got to work on technique, explosiveness, like all of that stuff. I could just maintain that year round, and I'd probably be a really great sprinter.
Yeah, so we built the calculator, and you can access it if you go into forum.trainerroad.com. Then you look up the name of this episode, which is episode 242. You'll be able to find it there. And that's the easiest way to find the link, I would say, if you're listening to the podcast or anything else.
If you Google Trainer Road Strength Training, it comes up. In the first article that comes up, there's a link to it too, right at the top.
Yep. So yeah, you just enter your weight, your gender, and then it gives you the strength training recommendations, or not training recommendations, but the strength recommendations, I should say.
Benchmarks.
For those levels. So once again, it isn't a training plan, but it's basically when to say when.
Exactly. When to say maintain.
Exactly.
And maintaining, we talked about before, is a lot easier than building.
Exactly.
You can spend 20 minutes and probably maintain your strength year round while you're doing like more intense stuff. Right now I'm doing a little bit more intense training, and man, weightlifting is so much harder. So much
It's
harder.
tough, right?
Yeah.
Pulls on some strings there. So a couple other things for content that we've been pushing out. Thanks to Jesse and Megan, our awesome copywriters. They've been doing a bunch. We have a post on Plan Builder, and this is all at trainerroad.com/blog, which it actually has a new look if you go there right now. It's exciting stuff.
I didn't even
That's
know.
been updated by our designers.
It's beautiful.
Looks fantastic. So if you go there, then you can check it out. We have an article on what to do basically if you have too much time in between now and your A event. Plan Builder takes care of this, but we basically go through how Plan Builder works in different scenarios so you can kind of get an idea. The coolest part is then you can just use Plan Builder and it will build it out for your scenario. But if you're curious, it's a good way to see kind of before you jump in, anything else like that. The other thing, Megan went into why you should measure your PRs, or actually, forgive me, Jesse did that one. Awesome piece. And that one went into something that I feel is totally underutilized. Don't you, Nate? Like in terms of a feature that we have, PRs and being able to compare your PRs with seasons and everything else.
Yep.
It's huge. Like for me, as soon as I get done with a workout, the first thing I do is I go over to Trainer Road and I look at the PRs from that ride, or like a ride outside, especially a race. I open it up and then I look at that to see where my power PRs fell. And then within the whole structure, I have seasons. So like instead of just comparing year over year, because that always sucks because you never get PRs until you actually get to peak fitness again, I can look at it and I can define a season. So I have like my 2019 base phase, my 2019 build phase, whatever else I want to do. Or I could use one for like building for X event or when I was sick. Yeah. And then I can use those seasons and compare my PRs then. So then I actually see real improvement long before peak fitness. It's super cool. So we went into detail on that and how you should use them, why you use power instead of some other methods. Really good article.
I think we're the only ones who do this. And with the season match, So I have 2019 road season and 2020 road season. And if you click the season match, it's going to compare my PRs between when I set the beginning of the season to like my first race. So we're going to talk about it. We're all three of us are racing this weekend. And I want to see how my power compares to this time last year.
Yes.
In a race. Because when you go through workouts, you kind of know you're stronger, but you don't. In the races when you really know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like another way of phrasing this is, let's say you're 4 weeks into your current season. If you use season match, you just check a little box. It'll compare that same point 4 weeks in across any other season you want. Exactly. So then you'll be able to see if like, oh, okay, it actually is working right now. You get a true like apples to apples comparison. And also like if you were switching from time trialing to cyclocross, for example, like very different disciplines in terms of power profile, you could use season match there too to see how quickly things are shifting. Because you probably, when you're doing, cyclocross, you don't care about your, 40-minute sustained power, but you do care about your 1 minute power, your 5 minute power, that sort of thing, right? So super cool. Goes into stuff on that. Then this was funny. Megan posted one on basically how to accelerate past someone in a sprint.
The sprinter's gap.
The sprinter's gap. And if you look on Instagram, a lot of people are like, stop giving out what I like, stop giving out all the tips that I use to beat people. Super good article and something that everybody should utilize in a sprint for sure. If you, there's a lot of things to keep track of when you're in the middle of a sprint, but this is one of the best ones that you can do to make it easier on yourself.
I'm pretty much obsessed now with the Williams brothers, with all their race tactics, because they are, in our area, like kind of unbeatable. Like not unbeatable, but like 90%.
Yeah,
they've got a good hit ratio.
Yeah, they're the most successful. Like if they're going to a race, they're going to be the most successful person there.
So Pete, correct me if I'm wrong, but I see in the last lap, they hug the corner, they hug the side. So if it's a right-hand turn, they hug the right-hand turn, swing out at the very last moment. They have a lead out, and then Justin or Corey, whoever's sprinting, will get a gap on their own person a little bit so that they can accelerate into the draft around that person.
Yeah.
And then someone, if they really are doing it well, someone behind Justin or Corey will then gap that, but then not sprint.
Yeah.
So someone has to come around. So they get the acceleration slingshot around someone. They guard the inside corner on the right turn, and they're gap someone. So that gets like 3 or 4 bike lengths.
Yeah.
And then they're amazing sprinters.
And their lead out guy falls into the sheltered side. So the sheltered side's always blocked.
Because that's the side where everyone wants to go
so
go
that's
around
the side
them.
where everyone could possibly pass them, and instead you give them the hard way only. So it's like...
So what would be the sheltered side?
Depends on the race, right? Like however...
The wind is
the
and
way
stuff
the
like
wind
that.
is and the way like if it pinches, you just want to make it more difficult for someone to come around you. So they have a 4 bike length lead, and you have to come around the hard way. Like, how are you going to beat that?
One thing I've noticed is that that rider that's behind the person that's sprinting, they don't just shut off instantly too. They actually carry on enough so that I think that because it happens in a sprint, we aren't as sharp as we should be. And a lot of the time you just stay behind somebody when it feels hard.
Yeah. It forces them into the wind. Well, no, it doesn't force them in the wind.
Yeah, well, it kind of like lulls them into like a false sense of confidence because they're still going hard enough so that you don't want to come around them initially, because if they instantly shut off, you're like, I'm going around them.
Exactly.
But they don't instantly shut off. And as a result, that means, once again, another 1 to 2 bike lengths.
And that's like Amber and I were talking about in the last race video. It's like a quarter of a second or a tenth of a second is probably 20 or 30 meters at that when you're going that fast, and you just lost 20 or 30 meters to come around someone, which is probably the difference. So again, it's another thing stacked in their favor where people just...
They do a fantastic job.
I know. I don't know them. I want to like go race down there. I'll obviously get beat pretty bad, but then I want them to do race analysis on me.
It'd be fun.
Yeah.
So Justin, Corey, the whole crew. It'd be fun.
That would be awesome.
Let's go down to CBR and do a race with him.
Justin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's do it.
It's like an easy flight.
Yeah.
So go down and back in a day.
Super quick.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Yeah,
Okay,
let's
cool.
go race a CBR.
It's just going to be so bad, though.
I mean, we'll get
No, but it's good, though. It's
education.
learning, right? Yeah.
We'll all learn from it. Yeah.
Speaking
Speaking of what you just said there, Pete, on the YouTube side of things, we actually had a video that just went up, a race analysis video on pro tips to efficiently move through the field.
Yeah.
So that one is your race at Hapeville, Georgia, right?
Yeah, at Speed Week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that one is all about like different, because you basically started late.
It was an explosion.
Yeah.
It was like, I don't know.
Yeah, like everything came together.
Yeah, starting dead last in a race that starts hard on a technical course, right? More or less.
You didn't explode. It was the race exploded.
Yeah, and then kind of filtering your way through the explosions as the bombs go off and 5 guys go off the back, and you're like, oh no.
I've never seen a race explode like that. It was 100 people, right?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
maybe
and you
110.
went through all of 100.
just pieces,
eventually
fractions of everything. So that's a really good one because you can, and that's something that I think all of us at some point in a race, whether you're trying to be smart and sit in the back and then move forward, kind of like Caleb Ewan did at that People's Choice Criterium recently. Wasn't that like perfectly executed? It was impressive. Or you are like the rest of us that are, sometimes we don't ride at the front and we get pushed to the back.
Yeah.
And when that happens, it's really important to understand how to move through efficiently because when I say it's easy to move up inefficiently, there's a great physical cost, but it's like mentally easy because you're just like, I just have to pedal hard. And you can go around people like that, but that'll only last for so long. And then once you get into your position, you won't have the energy you need.
Exactly.
So this is like a really good study on what to do there.
Yeah, that fine tuning between physical energy and mental energy is like what we spend a lot of time talking about.
Yep. We also did a quick clip on nutrition tips and how to, if protein intake blunts carb absorption. How to stick to your plan, avoid overtraining, how to stay hydrated and avoid cramps. All that's on our YouTube channel. The last piece that I really want to cover on is an interesting one that was just posted by Jesse recently. And we basically just looked at like different, it basically answers the question that it's titled How to Build a Pacing Plan for Long Events. This is apt considering a lot of you probably just got your Leadville lottery announcements. And then some of you are going to get the Kansas one hopefully soon.
Monday.
Fingers are crossed for Nate. Hopefully it happens. For those sort of things, it's crucial to build out a pacing plan. He talks about how to build one out, how to stick to it. But one of the interesting things is we basically just looked at some data on longer rides and like capacitive efforts, that sort of stuff, and kind of broke down like what sort of IF window or range you should kind of go for different races. So you can go on there and figure it out. And something that's really interesting, and it definitely backs up how we talk about all the time that, Nate, for Kansas, you're not going to go do 12-hour rides to prep for Kansas.
No.
And because we talk about that, the energy system demand is actually really similar for even something as long as when we're talking about like 2 hours up to something that's much longer like that. There's not a whole lot of change in terms of what goes on, even intensity factor.
It's all aerobic.
There's no extra energy system.
Yeah, that's it. You're down to one. Whereas when it's shorter durations, it's more dynamic and more complex. So it's really cool. It's a good guide for pacing. You should check that out. So with all of that, Pete, something we should recap for some takeaways for people.
Yeah.
You just did the coast ride. And
I did 2/3 of it.
Okay.
Let's be honest. Let's throw that out there right at the beginning. Sure. I did the first 2 days and 20 miles of the last day.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What is the coast ride? For people who don't know.
You start in San Francisco. You start at the Golden Gate Bridge with a few hundred other people, and you end up in Santa Barbara after 3 days. So it's about 125 miles a day and somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 feet of climbing a day. It was very long.
Longer than a crit?
Longer than a crit. I think the longest ride I did was with you leading into it. So I did a 3 hour and 40-minute ride a few weeks before. But
with like a 15-minute gas station stop.
Yeah, so probably
don't take that out of it.
Longer than 15 minutes. But it was really fun. It was really well put on. The SAG, you kind of pay for SAG and support. You bring a bag and you stay in hotels. But they did a really good job. One of the interesting things, it's a staggered start. So you start with somewhere between by yourself and 20 or 30 people, and people roll out every 5 or 10 minutes. And the speed differential is always there. So you're always catching people, and people are always passing you over the course of the day.
And this isn't like a competitive ride in any way.
There are some people who ride harder than others.
Okay.
But a lot of people were treating it as a training camp. Some of the really fast, there were some fast guys there. There was a few Illuminate riders there. The team Mike Spikes was there.
I think Payson McKelvin, friend of the podcast.
Payson was there.
Ted King was
there. I mean, there was fast people.
Trainer Road user Ted King, we should say. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
But it was really fun, and you could kind of jump in with groups that were faster than you, hang out for a while, drop off, and then you got to take everything at your own pace. And there was a SAG. Anytime there was a pullout on the road, there was a SAG wagon with food, drink, like repair stuff, so you were never actually stuck. It was cool.
Pretty sweet.
It was a good time.
So it's basically a big volume camp, right?
Yeah.
Crash a bunch of volume into just a handful of days.
I think I did 7 hours both days, more or less.
Do you recommend it?
Yes, it was fun.
Do you want to do it next year?
I do. I just signed up for John's ski camp the same weekend.
Yeah, we're going to Powder Creek Lodge during the same time.
I wish I would have done it.
I think
it would have been perfect.
I didn't know how good it was. We'd heard about it, right? You've heard about the Coast Ride for multiple years. I just didn't quite understand. Actually, Scott Withoff is who runs it and
friend of the podcast.
Podcast. He lives in Reno some of the time, so he was super organized. Kept everything really dialed. It was
just beautiful, right?
And it's beautiful
the whole time.
Yeah, I've ridden day one before that route, and it's awesome.
How are the roads?
Super fun. A mix, I would say. Like
overall, good.
Yeah, but overall,
as far as California roads are concerned, good.
Way better than Sonoma County.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Not as sketchy as that for sure. Yeah. So what things did you learn along the way? They're long days. Did you do anything different for nutrition or anything?
We
just eat a lot.
I just ate a lot. I overate dinner and overate breakfast pretty much twice as much.
No, there's no such thing.
Yeah. Well, so let's say
if you're doing a 125-mile ride, really, it's hard to do.
Yeah,
it's hard to do. So I kind of doubled. I ordered 2 entrees at dinner, and I made twice as much breakfast as I would normally make, even for a bike ride day, just on purpose. I think I was doing 5,000 kilojoules a day, so it was a lot.
It's hard to eat, too, because like you spend so much time on the bike that you don't have much time during the rest of the day to get food in your stomach.
Exactly. And one of the things we realized is we kind of broke the ride in half because I really needed to eat lunch. I was going to be starving and fall apart. So we stopped for lunch, and we told everybody that we were going to stop for 45 minutes, and that irritated some people. But it was the way it was. And then we ate real lunch.
Well, not everybody, just people in your group.
Just people in our group. So there was like probably 6 or 8 of us most of the time rolling together. And some people like to get going sooner, like Jonathan.
Don't like stopping. Yeah.
But I definitely needed to eat real lunch, and I ate real lunch, and the next 20 minutes when I started riding in was painful, but I made it through. I always felt better the last hour, like from 6 to 7. I could actually turn on the power again. I think you're also close to the end. It was usually like the difficult riding is kind of stacked in the first 2/3 of the course. So it's usually like tailwindy, crosswindy, pretty flat, so you can put some power down and get to where you're going.
Did you do anything to like? Because I know you've had knee issues in the past, especially with long days.
Yeah.
Did it rear its ugly head? Did you do anything to manage it?
Yeah, I did. I think we were talking about it yesterday. I'm pretty sure my bike fit is 100% dialed. I love the way I fit it on my bike. I love my saddle. I love my chamois. I love my chamois butter. Everything I do always works perfectly. But I started to get some undercarriage wear and tear.
Yes.
Yes.
And with 125 mile days.
I just so I think I started adjusting because of that and scooting myself forward or back, and that was what put some strain on my knee. And the second day had a lot of climbing and a lot of sustained climbing, which is harder on me too. So rather than chance it, I just pulled the plug in San Luis Obispo.
I mean, there's worse spots to pull a plug.
Yeah,
sure.
I got to go to 2 coffee shops and have breakfast with Jacob, my old teammate, and then we got back on the bike, and I still didn't feel any better. So, oh well, it's done.
Nice. So you want to do the coast ride next year?
Nate? I do, unless it's like pouring rain the whole time.
Yeah. Which can happen, but
it can happen,
not.
Yeah. But a little bit of rain's fine. But if it's 3 days of like 50-degree weather and pouring rain, probably not.
You said you met a lot of podcast listeners.
I met a ton of podcast listeners, and thank you guys for always coming up and talking to me and saying hi.
Can you push?
Yeah, they were. It was amazing. And since you pass so many people and so many people pass you get to actually interact with a ton of people, like probably 100 or 200 people a day if you really want to. And so a bunch of podcast listeners stopped rode next to me nicely. And we had a great time. A lot of people came from different parts of the country, like people from Colorado, people from Texas.
People come from around the world for this thing.
Yeah. And so that second ride from Monterey to Morro Bay, where you go through Big Sur, is like one of the most beautiful stretches of road in the world, probably.
Yeah, for sure. So if you're going to do this next year, let us know, so then you can join Nate. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome. Okay, Andreas's question says, I want to modify Sweet Spot mid-volume in the following ways and would appreciate your feedback. I prefer putting in the alternative longer workout for Sunday workouts, just as the instructions indicate I can do. Am I working for similar adaptations compared to the shorter, more sweet spot-ish workout of the day, Or am I targeting something totally different and missing out on something important? Before we go into the next question, we should probably answer that one and maybe give some context too on like what's being suggested.
So I worked with Chad when we did this, and we used to have really long Sunday workouts on those plans, and then we looked at compliance, and nobody was doing them. So you can give like, if no one does it, it's a bad plan.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. Yep.
Like it was really, really low for compliance. So we did is we switched them to shorter workouts with being sweet spot, which gives you some similar adaptations. But really, if you're going for longer events, those longer rides are going to be better if you have the time and you will do them.
Right.
Those are two things.
Yeah.
Key point.
Yeah. So we moved them to the like the instructions to say, yes, if you have the time and do it, you can do it. You can do it outside if you want to, but if you're time crunched like I am, you can do them inside. And the benefits, I mean, people all day long, not all day long. I've been in a few discussions where people say you can't go long without going long.
Yeah.
Like I proved it at Leadville.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it again at Dirty Kansas if I can. And actually, too, we're going to talk about Dirty Kansas more later.
Yeah.
But if I don't do that, Lost and Found's like a week away from that.
That's perfect.
So I'll just do that instead.
Yeah.
And that's like 7 hours, so not as big, but
Yep.
it'll be fun. So yes, you're going to be having, especially if you're going long, it's probably better to do the longer aerobic outside workouts. But don't feel bad if you're doing the sweet spot ones, and because you still get a ton of benefit for that, and that's much better than going through halfway through the like having a 4-hour ride, getting 2 hours in, and then calling it quits.
Yeah.
It would have been better to do the sweet spot ride.
For sure. His second question, I feel I can handle more low-intensity volume within the week. Is it okay to, A, substitute a 45-minute recovery ride with something like a 60 to 75-minute Baxter, which Baxter is tempo for people that don't know.
Well, aerobic.
Yeah. So, and then says, and...
I know Baxter.
You know Baxter well. And do so again on one of my rest days. So the question is basically, is it okay to substitute the short one for something with that's longer because he feels like he can handle a little bit more.
Yeah, and so absolutely, and that's a great way if you're in a plan to start upping the volume before you jump to the next level. You can always look at the plus versions or just switch them out. And the only thing you have to be careful of is think of your plan in terms of not just those 2 days, but the weeks and the month, and maybe even more than that.
Yeah.
Very often, you're feeling good, you do that. That week is good, but then the next week, the fatigue starts setting in. You start failing the more intense workouts.
Yes.
And you look back and you're like, wow, maybe I shouldn't have done, like I could have removed 2 hours of aerobic to be able to hit these more intense workouts. So you just have to think of the whole holistic plan in it, and never, especially in a week, if your aerobic ride, let's say you only have 4 workout days a week, 3 of them are intensity and 1 of them is aerobic, and you bump that aerobic up, and then you can't do some of the intensity, you're probably not going to be as good than if you just would have had that be a little bit less and done the intensity.
The way I think of it is, so there's that saying, make hay while the sun shines, right? So like part of us goes like, I can train more. I'm just going to train more. But we forget how we actually move the needle forward in terms of getting faster. It isn't just by training more. It's about progressively loading appropriately. It's about offsetting the work with the rest. Those are necessary components. You can't just throw it all into the training bag and then hopefully, balances out later on. So that's so when you feel like you should make hay while the sun shines, it's true. You can add in some extra stress if you can balance all of that out and offset it appropriately. And if that's the case, yes. But yeah, the one thing I've found is that whenever I add an extra, even if it's just going harder on final intervals, that oftentimes is felt, not even maybe the next day, but the day after that. And it just adds up much more. It's got kind of like a delay to it. And once it hits, it can be profound, even smaller things that you add.
Another thing you have to think about is the stress and like what's going on in your life. Jonathan and I both have a sick son at home.
Yeah.
The dude, he asked for 4 hugs before bed every time, spitting in my face.
It's amazing. It's like they can go without coughing and sneezing for like an hour, and then when they come up to eat, just directly in my face every single time.
And the sneezes happen like, most people go at you. It's not like that. It's just instant.
Yes. Sniper
like
sneezes.
Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Just in your face.
It's like, and whenever it happens, like everything flashes before my eyes. It's like failed races, terrible fitness. Like it's like everything is like dropping. It's terrible.
I've trained like, I don't know, 8 weeks or more without any issue.
Yeah.
And then the day before, 2 days before, like some good races. This happens. Anyways, you got to think about that. Also, the stress. If it's a stressful work week, you got to get up early, or you're traveling or something. That is not the time to probably add it. I would go on the err on the side of caution, because really it's consistency over time. It's not that 1 week. The people who are consistent over time, and you guys have seen it because both of you guys have been the opposite.
Yeah.
You're not consistent over time sometimes.
Yeah.
And your fitness goes down. And when you are consistent, you guys are both screaming fast.
It just happens so quickly.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's like it works.
Yeah. And I think though, if you think you have the ability to add more volume, wait another week and then add the smallest amount you possibly can.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's smart. Like, I think of it in terms of like financial forecasting, right? So like, let's say that you take in X amount. So then you think, well, I can, if I just run it straight up to that line, I should be fine because that's guaranteed income. But you have all of these different things that are uncontrollable, and you can't anticipate them showing up. So you leave a little bit of a margin there, right? And that's like a responsible thing to do.
Exactly.
So when we're talking about with training too, I think it is actually, you're in a good spot if you have a little wiggle room. If you feel like you're running yourself down, you're just vulnerable and you're putting yourself up against a tight rope up against a rope that doesn't need to be.
I also
up against.
Another way to add volume is, so if he's on low volume, or he, I'm not sure. This athlete is on low volume. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday are the rides. And then I think on the mid volume. Anyways, there's a Wednesday aerobic ride. Instead of adding to the Wednesday ride, if you have the time, extend your Tuesday workout a little bit and add aerobic.
You can do that with extend, cool down, or warm up in the app. You just tap that button.
Extend the cool down in this case. And then and do that at whatever your aerobic pace is. And then on the next day, on Wednesday, you can see how you feel. And if you just feel horrible, well, you're cutting short your aerobic ride. And then on Thursday, you're back at it. But if you're feeling good, hey, maybe that could be out of that day, right? And I think that's a good tester, because you're gambling more on the less important ride of the week.
Yeah,
that's super smart.
Yeah, because the ones where we talk about the crucial workouts, usually it's the intensity that's really driving whatever the race performance is, especially if you're in the specialty phase. But in the base phase, those are like the sweet spot workouts, are the ones that are like maybe you're getting into over-unders, that sort of stuff. Those are your more critical workouts for the week. So those are the ones where you want to be able to preserve those as much as possible, for sure. So hopefully that's some helpful tips for anybody that's in a situation where they can feel like they can add more or, want to adjust.
Yeah.
And hopefully that helps. Barnaby says, hi guys, can you ask your users via the podcast to write more notes on their workouts? It's really cool to go through a plan and see how other people felt about the workouts you just finished or are just about to do.
I totally do this for workouts that scare me.
Yes.
I look in. So on the website, you can look at it, and then you can see other people's rides that are public. And I scroll down, and I look at failure rates too.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
And if everyone else does it, I'm like, okay, I can do this. And if other people have problems and they're like, that was so hard.
Yeah.
It's probably a bad thing, but it instantly puts me in the mind
it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. And absolutely. What are the things that you guys put in ride notes or feel like would be important to put in ride notes?
You want to go first? I do it all the time.
Yeah, you start.
I usually say how it felt, if I made any adjustments, why I made them. Because if you end early, sometimes you look back and you're like, why did I end that? Yeah. And it's very important to say, hey, I had to pick up the kids, or this was too intense.
Yep.
Totally different reason for ending early.
Exactly.
And then if I did anything weird that was out of the normal, that impacted my ride. So sometimes, I get that hypoglycemic thing. So if I eat an hour before my ride, it'll be so hard. Or if I do it, I usually don't work out in the morning. So if I work out really early in the morning, I'll even though the time's there, I'll say okay, worked out in the morning. I didn't eat anything before. And that made it harder than usual.
Yeah.
So then that way I can look back. I don't really say the things that I do every day that are normal. I say the things that are outside the norm.
Got it.
I like just anything that changes, everything that's consistent. It's always consistent. I do think about my motivation to train. Some days I'm super excited to train, and workouts are always easier, right? And some days I'm not excited to train.
Yeah. Even just a felt great. That's nice, because then when you look back at it and you look back at a time that you did really well, you look at the workouts you're doing, and then if you look at it and you see, I had 6 felt greats in a row. What was I doing around this time? What was my travel schedule? When was the last time I was sick? And I put all those annotations on the calendar so I know what happened to make that good block happen. Because a lot of it's outside of outside of the actual app that influences while you do it.
Yep.
I'm in the middle of like a flux period with my ride notes. So for quite some time, I was trying to, and a lot of people would always ask what I meant by this, but I would say like 7 sleep, 3 meal. And what I was saying there was basically, this is how much sleep I got, and then this is how long since my previous meal. And I did that and tracked that very regularly for a long time, and looked back at good workouts and bad workouts to find out that basically I do best when I eat 2.5 hours before a ride. So that was like really helpful for me to be able to do that, because I had like 6 months of data, more than that, a year full of data with that. Now I'm looking at it and I need to write down other things. And one of the things that I've been thinking about recently is putting down the PT that I did prior to, like the day of or the night before, and then how my body feels throughout the ride. Because every once in a while I'll hop off the bike like in the middle of like a break in between intervals, and I'll just do some mobility stuff for my hips, something like that, and I notice a difference when I'm back on the bike. Then some nights I'll do a PT routine and I'll have no issues whatsoever the next day. So I want to make sure that I'm consistent with that so then I can lock that down, because I feel like, especially with overuse injuries, you can get into a spot where it disappears and you're like, I got it. But I'd rather have a repetitive process, or like a repeatable process that I could put into practice to be able to fully avoid it and know that it won't come back. So that's one of the things.
The same way you eat 2.5 hours beforehand, you know the exact right PT process to do X amount of hours beforehand and what to do and how it makes you feel, right?
Yep. And I always do record like how I felt, and I try to record my best assumption in that moment as to why I feel that way. Sometimes those might be off, but at least that's like what I think it's important to record that in those moments. So, and if you do that all the time, then you'll be able to look back and see the data. So yeah, absolutely. It's in ride notes. If you just, after you complete a ride, you can enter in the ride notes right there in the app. It's super easy. So it's a good way to do it. Along those lines of things that we have here at Trainer Road that are awesome. One of the things that we also were doing was we're hiring. So a couple positions.
Sorry, it's repetitive, everyone, but we're probably going to, hopefully, hire these people forever.
Yeah.
We have a pretty rigorous hiring process, so it might be open forever now because of growth, like keeping up with the growth.
Sure.
React Native, C#, engineers really like working here.
Yeah.
We have a really it's been so long since an engineer's quit, years. And they love the code base, very clear tasks, and our deployment process is awesome, and our testing process is awesome, and the code review process is awesome, and no one's a jerk.
That's what you dreamed of when you worked at a Fortune 500 company, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Like we can deploy. So if you work on the back end side, we can deploy the website 10 times in a day. Anytime a PR is merged, it's automatically released with tests, and then on the app side too, we have full suite of tests with all the devices. That was really hard to do, and it's always testing never ends. So you always add tests to it, but I'm going to say it's a cool place to work.
It's a very cool place to work.
Yeah. So if you're a React Native or C# engineer, you can go to trainerroad.com/jobs, or also if you're just looking for any sort of opportunity outside of that, always just bookmark that site and you can return to it.
I want to say too, I would love to hire all of you. There's so many people who are passionate and they come and their skills just aren't exactly aligned with what we have, and we get some really high quality candidates. So I especially if I interact with you a lot, I feel so bad when I reject people, but some of these things are so competitive.
Yeah.
And some of the people I'm like, you want to work here?
Yeah, it's great, right?
Yeah,
those are the sort of people, that you want.
You're way better than I am, which is awesome.
Yeah. That's how it should be, right? So Matt's question says, what should I eat during a recovery week? Do I continue eating high quality to aid the recovery? Do I eat more salads and improve body composition that week? Or do I finally indulge in pizza for the sake of a mental break, since I always crave pizza and usually deny myself slices when in a training block? He says, thanks, eating pizza while awaiting your answer.
Okay. I'll talk really slowly so you can eat more pizza. No, this is a good question.
Yeah, it is.
And so optimal would be high quality to aid recovery. If you were a robot,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
I think we all agree, and this is a trap people fall in, is don't, if you just did a 3 to 5 week block, don't try to improve body composition during that recovery period, because that recovery period is when your body is really absorbing and you're going to get that pop in FTP.
Yep.
And that pop in FTP, you don't know what it is, but it is amazing. And when it happens, it feels so good.
Yeah, and
Right?
it's also worth saying, I think, for all of us here, that when you go through in the rest week, there is for the majority of us, there's probably some sort of pressure that we put on ourselves that like we're not training as much. So therefore I really need to watch it in terms of like body composition. But I've found that actually in terms of the outcome, that doesn't usually satisfy the outcome that I want.
I found that having a few indulgences on that recovery week makes it easier for me to stay focused the other 3 to 5 weeks. Mm-hmm. So, like I'm trying to get into wine, which is a weird thing to say, but I've got some wine. There's a Vivino app, which is amazing. And I have some wine at home, and I'm only drinking it on recovery weeks.
Yeah.
1 to 2 glasses. I'm not doing anything crazy.
Right.
But that then, a little mental break, it's nice. It's like it's ability to relax.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, that's good. And if that makes me really nail my other plan and not get these like binges, which is, that's the problem, is when you restrict yourself too much and then you get a binge. And people say everything in moderation, but the binges are what hurts you. And then I find too, when I binge on something, then that food starts tasting a lot better.
Yeah.
And the healthy food starts tasting a lot worse. I just saw in the forum, actually, someone was complaining about Ezekiel bread and cereal that it tastes like nothing. That's because there's no added sugar. And you eat Ezekiel cereal a whole bunch, and you're like, this tastes awesome. And then you eat like a sugary cereal, and you're like, whoa, this is like, how can I? You ever eat like a kid cereal?
Oh, yeah.
You're like, this is disgusting. But if you eat that a lot, you're like, this is pretty good. Captain Crunch, that tastes good.
Right. Yeah. It's and the thing about like the binging side of things, I think a lot of it is psychological. I mean, it is psychological, but we don't think of it many times that way. We just tie it into like it's a craving and it's a physical need. But it is psychological. And when you talk about a recovery week is not only physical, it should also be psychological, because I know, at least so I'll just speak for me personally. When I go through a training block, there's a lot of like mental warfare going on, right? Like it's hard when you're training, like battling yourself and saying that you can do this, hold on, you can stick through that interval. Or when you have an intimidating workout coming up that day and you decide to take it on, that's tough. Like you're fighting against a lot of like opposition, even internally with all of that, not to mention all the external things that you're having to overcome in order to train. So that's really tough, and psychologically it can be hard. So it is important during that rest week, I've found, to be a bit more lenient on myself, but that doesn't mean just like it
fall off the wagon.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't fall off the wagon.
Yeah, it's not just one or the other here. There's a spectrum to be operated on.
I usually do one fall off the wagon meal.
Yeah.
Or it's just whatever I want. Olive Garden tour of Italy, which is like 2,200 calories.
Yeah, just go full in.
And then the next day you're just like, I will not eat like this for another month. Because it's horrible.
Yeah. There's, I'm sure, a cycling joke tied in there somewhere. With
There's a good question.
Meal.
What is your hardest mental part of a plan?
Honestly, mine is getting back into it after the rest week. That's for sure.
Hard one.
Hard. I love that.
See, I always feel pretty bad after a rest week. But I definitely emphasize quality food and like really try to maximize that recovery period. But I usually ride a lot less and catch up on regular life things. So generally speaking, my legs feel worse, and that week of like getting back into the mix is so hard for me.
After that week,
then it's wonderful.
Then it's fine.
Yeah.
Right?
Wonderful.
Air quotes. Air quotes. Yeah.
My hard part is it's the final week before recovery. It's like a day or two before vacation at work. You're like, man, vacation's right there. Why don't we just leave today?
You get senioritis, right?
Yeah, exactly. And two, like race week, like the last workouts before the race. And two, for race week, I'm always in my head. I'm like, should I be doing this? Should I not be doing this?
Yeah, you question everything.
Is this too much?
I do like that race week feeling, right?
Yeah.
It's funny, you guys are like inverted, right? That's a really good point on sticking to it. And going through the whole thing. And that's why I think having like a plan laid out is so key. Because especially like in our situations where we know like we don't necessarily have to have a plan. And all of us here in this room, we could lay out our workouts every day and it would be a good progression. We understand that sort of thing, right? But it's super important for me to have the plan because of the accountability it forces upon me of basically like, you have to do this, because otherwise it does get pretty hard. Like I get to like the end of like right now I'm in my final like the loading cycle basically of 3 weeks, and then next week is my recovery week, and it's so tempting to just be like, just take take that Friday off.
You could, so we know enough to right now build it, but then when you get into it in that final week, you're like, maybe I wasn't thinking so clearly back
Yeah.
then. And I'm just going to tweak a little bit.
Yeah,
Where now I'm just like, I'll just do what Chad says.
Yeah,
And I just like
exactly.
trust it. And then because I've had success before and I know all the
Yeah.
success for Trainer Road people have done, I'm like, okay, I'll just do it. I know this is hard. And
Yes.
I'm really, am I really that bad?
Yeah.
Am I
Yeah.
really that bad? Now let's just take some HTFU
Yeah.
inside of me.
Yeah.
I want to touch on something that I feel like is totally inverted, like an understanding point that I feel like people get wrong. So there's like the saying of like, if the furnace is burning hot, toss whatever you want in there,
Oh, yeah.
right? And so people think like when I'm training, I can eat whatever I want. And the answer is yes, you can.
You can.
But once again, doesn't mean you should, right?
Yeah.
And in this case, I think the way that I've evolved to see this, and I feel that it helps my training immensely, is quality work requires quality fuel.
For sure.
And when you're in your recovery week, there's not as much quality work going on. It's not as difficult. It's not as much load, period. And as a result, I don't think that the quality necessarily has to be that high. That said, I'm sure if you looked at the science behind everything, it would be better for your body if you ate quality all the time, right? But there is like a psychological balance point to be hit with this. But I think a lot of people do things backwards from what they should. They eat whatever they want during the loading weeks. And then in that deload week or that recovery
Salads.
week, they're like salads.
Tuna, what's your tuna?
Seared ahi salads,
There you
right?
go, that's
yeah,
yours.
yeah. That was my pre-race meal. Trying to lose weight in the middle of a stage race.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
I do think there's one more thing you can do to help you out. I think we're really lucky here, like having you guys around all the time. You have like accountability partners, and then like even Strava, there's accountability. You know, like there's a lot of accountability that you can build into your kind of lifestyle, and it makes all those hard decisions slightly easier because you have other people to share it with.
The culture here is I have to be really careful that we don't go into like hostile work territory just because like, hey, what are you eating? Why are you eating that? That's fried.
How much did you weigh this morning?
With Chad, there's no holds barred, actually.
But we just have
go
to.
all in
I mean,
on
we always look at what we're eating. We're always curious and like we're always proud too. Pete's like, look at all these vegetables that I have, right? And then we show it and like, what are you eating? And so. And we get on Brandon. Brandon's like, the furnace is hot.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
He had
Brandon
donuts
is on
this
that.
morning.
He did. He's been improving his quality.
What did he tell us this morning? He's like, Thursday's my easy day. I sleep in, I wake up, I eat donuts, I don't train. So he was,
Maybe that's a mental thing for him though.
Exactly.
Because
It
he
helps.
does train more consistently than any of us.
It's
Yes,
true.
he does.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that is a good point.
Can I plug my Instagram?
Actually, one quick thing. Yeah, the accountability partner thing is great, and you can have that there at work. But like, even my son, bless his heart, he's an awesome little accountability partner. Like, I come home.
Does he tell you? He shame you?
No, he doesn't shame me. Thank goodness, no. But like when I come home, he always asks me every single night, "How'd your workout go? How'd your training go?" And I think it's because he sees that pattern from my wife, which she's an awesome accountability partner on that. I ask her how her kickboxing went or whatever else she had that day, and then she always asks me, and we kind of go into depth, and we probably bore each other. But I think that we do that because we know that it helps that individual.
Picture
you know
the
what I mean?
lead dinner table.
Dinner table.
Well, the second interval was pretty hard, but then the third one, I started to really get my stride. Yeah.
Honestly, that's not far off.
Jonathan like pulls up like analytics.
Yeah, he's
Performance
like-
analytics
he's
is
like-
like doing sections on
If
it.
you can see my cadence dropping right here, you knew I was in trouble.
Exactly. Yeah, not far off. Not
Sarah's
far
like,
off at all. Yep.
Good. Thanks,
Yep.
honey.
And then she starts on the kickboxing thing, and I smile and nod, right? Yeah. But it is really helpful to have people that are going to check up on you, not check up in terms of like you're in trouble if you don't sort of a thing. But and you can be that for somebody else. And sometimes if you're that for somebody else, then they'll do the same thing for you later on. So super helpful. On the nutrition side of things though, people should tune into your Instagram over the next 20 or 48 hours.
Forever.
Really
Yeah,
say, yes,
also
this
forever.
is true. But
So-
specifically over the next 48 hours, what are you going to do?
I am going to. So we have race weekend, and
Yes, we
I
do.
am going to carb load. And I'm carb loading for a hour crit and a 2 hour mountain bike.
Which, hold on, right there, people are probably like,
70-minute crit.
Oh, it's 70?
Yeah.
Oh, the amount of carbs just changed. Just kidding.
people are probably like, what in the heck are you doing, Nate?
Yeah.
You don't have to carb load because it's not a long race.
Yeah, like what people are saying, they're typing, Nate, you will not run out of glycogen stores in a 70-minute race, right? And
Yes,
that's
and
true.
that's true.
Yeah.
I won't. But the performance will be better, and my RP will be lower, or RP will be the same, performance will be higher if I carb load. There's data to back that up.
Yes.
So what I'm aiming for is 10 grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight over 2 days. That equals about 860 grams of carbs for 2 days. And then I'm going to aim for 400 the day of the race. And luckily, on the first day, we raced at like 4 p.m.
Yeah,
so
4:10.
I'll easy be able to hit that.
Lucky.
Yeah.
Not me.
So to carb load, there's many different ways.
Cat 3.
And I've looked, I've done like a lot of research on carb loading, and they all kind of get you to the same spot because they can measure how much glycogen you have. So like a 5-day carb load is the same as a 2-day intense carb load, is the same as there's one way where you deplete and then you carb load.
Yep.
But you don't have to do it that way.
Yeah.
So the 2-day carb load is what I like. I've had great success with it. It's hard. And I'm going to try to do it with mostly quality food, but not 100%. And I just remembered I forgot a bunch of food at home. Shoot.
We can remedy that.
I know. Maybe I could go pick that up. But
So you've heard us on the podcast talk about how much Nate eats, and this is a good opportunity to see how much Nate eats.
no, this is a hard day.
So,
this is training.
Like, it's hard to eat
I'm
that
not
much,
looking
right?
forward to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, very hard.
But it is, and like you talked about, it's not about avoiding a bonk. It's about improving performance all the way along until you would reach some sort of inevitable bonk point. But the point is, it makes you actually faster. It doesn't just stop you from stopping.
And the second day mountain bike race, I think I'll have better performance on that day by loading Thursday, Friday before that Sunday workout or Sunday race.
Yep.
And the other tip is you'll see very low fat and very low protein. At least you're not going to see big pieces of meat and fatty things. That's to keep the calories down, or else you just can't absorb it and weight gain. But I've done this in MyFitnessPal before. If you put in all the if you put it all in, you're actually getting a ton of protein because all these like even oatmeal and bread,
quality carbohydrates have good
Yes.
macronutrient balance.
It's like lentils, quinoa. They all have a ton of protein, or not a ton, but if you eat a ton of it, you're going to get a lot of protein.
Yep.
So I bet I'd be over 180 grams of protein for the day, which is plenty for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Colin's question says, thanks as always for a great podcast and for such a rockin' product.
We didn't say my Instagram handle.
Oh, forgive me. Yeah. npearson99, right?
Yeah, NPEARSON 99.
Can I plug mine?
Sure.
Lee Jonathan _ because I'm going to wax a chain tomorrow and I'm going to document that process.
Do you want to wax mine too?
Sure.
All right, perfect.
Yeah, we'll do that.
You got to strip it and stuff.
Yeah.
Did you got a fresh chain?
Brand new.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, because I need to put on a new chain. So I'm going to go through that whole process. So
I would maybe do it today if you have time.
I don't have time today.
Okay. Just make sure you ride it. You get
It'll
that
be
quick
tomorrow.
link really in there.
So tomorrow, Pete and I are actually going to go do. We'll talk about this later because we're going to talk about the race later.
Okay.
Restraint. We'll move forward. Okay. So next one is from Colin. Says, "Hey guys, thanks as always for a great podcast and a rockin' product, as I just said. Forgive me." He says, "My question is regarding outdoor workouts. I'm currently following low volume plans with Tuesday and Thursday being the first 2 interval rides of the week, and Wednesday is an extra Zone 2 trainer ride that I manually add in. The third interval ride of the week is set to an outdoor ride on Saturdays, and since I'm a cross-country mountain biker, I always have my outdoor mountain bike ride on Saturdays. As you can imagine, it's not always possible to follow the prescribed interval structure for this ride, especially during the sweet spot base phases. And the reason that he's saying that is because lower intensity and longer intervals, that usually doesn't really mix with mountain bike trails because they are variable and they force you to go pretty hard just because of the nature of the steepness of the trail. So, question is, if I can't match the prescribed intervals, what is the next metric I should try to match such that the Saturday rides support my overall plan's goals? Should it be TSS? Should it just be duration? Some combination of other metrics? From Colin Drake. So I guess this one, the first thing I would probably say is reschedule your Saturday ride for another day in the week since you aren't training every day of the week if you can, Colin. That would be better.
That's adding 4. That'd be 4 rides per week.
Yeah, and that's kind of like I usually refer that as like blocking or stacking workouts, and it's something that I do with all of my training plans. I basically Monday through Friday I fit in a mid-volume plan, so that's 5 days right there, and then that leaves my Saturdays and Sundays because I know I can tolerate more stress than what I have on the Monday to Friday. But kind of like what we talked about before, I give myself leeway, so then I can add in more. Or if something comes at me, then I'm not crushed if I still follow the plan. And the benefit of doing that, especially if you're a mountain biker or anything else, you need to work on skills or anything like that, is the fact that you have your Saturdays to be able to do that sort of thing.
That is, I'm going to sneeze. Whew.
Close to sneezing.
Like the adult sneeze, though, right? Where it's going to take a second.
Yeah.
You guys can lean back. That stacking it, just you have to be careful because that's going to put intensity back to back, and that can crush some people. Doesn't crush Captain America, Jonathan. But
I hate it when that happens.
okay, so another way, low volume, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. The way the plans are built is the most important are probably, arguably, either Tuesday or Saturday.
Depends on the person, right?
Yeah, and your goals. Thursday is a little bit less important. So what I would do is I would take that Saturday workout and actually do it on Thursday, and then have the Thursday workout be on Saturday. And what it also does is you can also switch it around is based on your trails, you might be able to do a version of that workout mountain biking if the intervals are short enough. So sometimes the Saturday ones, sweet spot base, might be like 2x20 sweet spot, which a lot of people don't have sustained 20-minute climbs.
Right.
But if it's especially in sweet spot base volume 2, if it's some of the VO2 max ones where it's like 1-minute intervals or 2-minute intervals,
probably do those.
If you don't have 1 or 2-minute intervals by you, like you should move because that's not a place to mountain bike.
Chances are everybody can do that, even if you live in flatland. You know what I mean?
The next best case, so I would do that, would be try to match TSS, but also hit those energy systems. So if you're doing the Thursday, and Thursday is sustain or sweet spot, I can't remember off the top of my head. Try to do some of that. If it's VO2 max, try to hit that VO2 max system, and maybe you're not going to get that exact same workout because of your trails, but try to be in that like upper respiratory like V3 where you're really breathing and hit that energy systems. Because if our goal is to hit that energy system every week, and you can't do it perfectly, just try to touch it.
Yeah, one of the things that I've done is I've looked at a workout before. If I know that I, for some reason, can't do it on the trainer, can't replicate it for some reason outside, I'll look at the amount of time that I spend in that energy system, and ideally I could match the interval structure. But if I can't, I at least try to get the same amount of time in at that. So let's say that I was supposed to spend 15 minutes in VO2, that sort of thing. If I add up all the time, then on that ride I'll try to shoot for 15 minutes of doing that, right? So that's I guess kind of like when we're talking reductions. Yeah. One quick thing on a trail tip, and this is funny that we were talking about San Luis Obispo earlier. If you have train tracks, and that place, San Luis Obispo, has a grade, and a train has to go up a pretty steep grade. But when trains go up things, they don't go at fluctuating grades or anything else. If you can find a safe train track area where like there's a dirt road, because a lot of them have dirt roads next to them.
There's like a frontage road.
On the train track.
Don't ride on train tracks. This is absolutely bad. Not recommending that. I'm saying most of them have some sort of frontage road by them, or like a really wide shoulder,
like
something like that.
Area.
So in that case, those can be really good if you, for some reason, are hunting for something. Much better than a road most times, because a road will fluctuate, but these ones they have to be stable.
It's like a trainer road.
Hey now.
Dad jokes.
So that's like one thing you can. That's one thing you can do. Pete, are you the sort of person that like have you stacked workouts like this?
I'm not a stacker, but what I always do is look at the weeks or each week and prioritize my number one workout, my number two workout, and make like I always hit my number one workout no matter what the week throws at me. Well, we'll find out. Recently, yes.
That's the intent.
Recently, yes.
Generally speaking, I always get one workout in a week. I mean, even all through the year. And that's kind of my bare minimum. That means I'm getting slower, but at least I did the most important thing I had to do.
Sure.
Generally speaking, you get faster the more of your priority workouts you do. So I have 4 workouts a week. 2 are always really, really important. Always try to knock those 2 out. And then one's usually aerobic, and then one's a recovery ride. So always skip the recovery ride first, and then go from there.
I want to say more about reduction. So if we talked about hitting the energy systems, the next kind of reduction to hit would probably be TSS. So this isn't the best, but if you were supposed to do 120 TSS, 200 TSS outside on the mountain bike trail, but it's not like it can be done so many different ways that you could not touch your VO2 max system at all, your threshold, and get the same TSS. So that's why it's not as good as one. First would executing the workout. Second is probably time and zones for the energy system.
Yep.
Third is hitting the energy systems. Fourth is TSS. And then the last is just duration. It says 90 minutes, so I just ride for 90 minutes. That could be anything.
Yeah, you can do any sort of thing. And with TSS, it's kind of similar. Like you can accumulate a certain amount of TSS in so many different ways.
And you can also go longer. So just because it says 120 TSS, let's say you could do the workout, but you want to mountain bike more, and it's not going to impact the rest of your weeks, go for it. Like
Yeah.
that's going to make you faster.
Sure.
Especially with mountain biking with skills and stuff like that. If it impacts everything else, and maybe that's okay if skills is a weakness, but again, just going back to the other one, think about your whole plan. Think about the month. Think about 3 months.
Yeah.
And maybe 2, based on what we talked about on the eating one, maybe doing longer mountain bike rides make you more compliant long term because you get less burnout and more
Exactly.
like joy and enjoyment.
Yeah.
It's such a hard decision for all of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, once again, if you just cast the vision down the road a bit and you look at what's going to make you...
Nice pun.
Sorry. We're full of them right now.
Again, not here to say.
But if you do that, then you'll be looking ahead, and you should always be putting yourself in a position so that you can complete your workouts next week, sort of a deal. And if you do that, then you're going to have more consistent training. And one of and if we look at people that are getting faster versus people that are not getting faster, one of the most common threads is consistency. And if they're consistent with their training, they almost always get faster, higher watt kg even.
Yeah.
It's a common thread that you see.
Some people you can be on low volume and get faster for years.
Yeah.
And then if you are consistent and you aren't getting faster, that's when you want to add volume.
Yep.
And that's going to happen for every single person in the world.
Yes.
There will be a time that you will plateau. And usually it's time to add volume. Other people will be like, I'll change my, I'll do whatever the next fad is and change it. Look at like if you're not doing consistency and you're not getting faster, do that first.
Yeah.
And then look at volume.
Before you just jump to fads.
Yeah, I know.
A couple product things that make this sort of thing easy, like what we're talking about here. For you, Colin, number one, you can switch around the days of the workouts either ad hoc, like once it's on your calendar, your plan, you can switch them around. But when you use Plan Builder to build out your training plan, which if you're listening to this in your training, we still get like a surprising amount of questions from people that are asking like which training plan should they pick, and Plan Builder, man, it's so nice.
Yeah,
like it answers everything for you. I think there's even like a meme about that on the forum that like basically like said that this is the answer to all questions. But so if you do that, you can actually arrange which days that hard or easy day of your plan will always fall in your week. You can just drag and drop and change it around, and it'll build your plan like that. So it's super easy. And the outdoor workouts thing, I love being able to have like that choice. It makes it removes like a big barrier for me, so that because like right now at home I don't have a good training setup at home, but I do at my office. So I know, but if I'm at home on the weekend, I know I can do an outdoor workout now with outside workouts. It's awesome, works really well, works on my watch, works on my head unit. So now that you can train inside, outside, do the whole thing and stick to the plan, it's a cool setup. So Colin's question, or forgive me, next one from Christopher. Says, I'm an experienced rider from the south of France, and we've got quite some challenging climbing events here. Can you give me more in-depth advice on nutrient-type evolution throughout a full-day event, such as 9-hour grand fondos, as in the effects of solid food like a Cliff Bar at the beginning versus at the end of the event? And at what, if any, point should we transfer to purely gels and liquid nutrition, provided we stay at an endurance pace? So before we go any further, and then we'll read through the rest of the question, but I just want to share the assumption that that's operating upon. We hear this pretty commonly, right, Pete?
Yeah.
Where it's like start solid, right?
Yeah, start solid for as long as you hold on to solids for as long as you can, and then swap to liquids.
That's the assumption that we hear all
That's
the
what
time.
Generally people think is the right way to ride long events.
Right. So in this case, Christopher continues and says, could you also throw in your personal methods of figuring out what is causing your stomach to stress, i.e. too much solid, dehydration, too much gel, water, energy powder type, quantity, etc., as during a 180-kilometer 3-mountain event, you eat and drink so many things that aren't even necessarily going to known products. That's definitely the case. You show up at an aid station and you're like,
what is this?
I never knew that I could eat a s'mores Pop-Tart in the middle of a ride, right? But you do. So absolutely love the podcast and your training plans, especially the new Plan Builder. I've taken so many notes and learned so much, and it's not only helping me physically, but also significantly helping me mentally now that I know how so many of these different topics work. Thank you. That's exactly the goal. So that's really gratifying to hear, because that's what we go for. So
So one thing we've talked about before is glucose, fructose. Too much of that can cause GI distress. There's a bit of I think, training your gut biome of being able to handle a lot.
Yep.
And 2-to-1 of glucose to fructose has been the norm. Although there was another article saying that you could go 1-to-1, like 2-to-1 in a 90 gram. Sorry, step back. 2-to-1 glucose to fructose in a 60 grams glucose, 30 gram fructose per hour. So that's 90 grams of carbs. That is has been the recent best practice and research, and that's what Martan and SIS Beta Fuel.
They're based on that.
Yep. And then recently there's been some discussion that no, you can go up to 150 grams per hour in a 1-to-1 of glucose to fructose. So that'd be 75 grams of each. That is a huge difference, right?
Massive.
Yeah,
I mean,
massive.
I haven't tried it personally.
Have I tried it?
I mean, not intentionally. Maybe I
done it.
have unintentionally, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think I have tried
I think
it.
I've done it to 150 in a 2-to-1 ratio of glucose to fructose.
I have.
And how I know is, so when I'm training and I'm doing this, is when I start getting gas, stuff's not absorbing, and it's bad. Or GI. Sometimes I'll get gas with no GI upset. I have like pretty iron stomach, so that's kind of like the key that I do. So in training, I try to do that. Even in a 2-hour ride, try doing like that and see if you can handle over 2 hours. And then you might be like, again, the people are going to like, hey, you don't need that much for a 2-hour ride.
Yeah.
Well, the argument of how well you'll be, but let's put that aside. This is like you're testing something for a 9-hour Grand Fondo to see if you can do it.
And it's much better to test it over an hour to 2 hours first, and then
you can't do it in a 2-hour ride. There's no way you're going to do
Exactly.
a 9-hour ride.
Exactly.
exactly.
And maybe you can build up to it too.
That's for what it's worth. That's exactly how I got, because I famously had a very fragile gut.
You just used to say, look at the Hellcats. You're like, I just can't do it.
I just can't do it.
It's impossible.
I can't do long stuff. And the main reason I couldn't do long stuff was because of that. But I just started on all of my rides. I just fueled them like I would be fueling something like a larger event.
I would say too, you could do long stuff. You just couldn't do it at the same intensity.
Yeah.
You would do it at a lower intensity and
Yeah.
not feel as good.
Yep. But I took that approach of even my 1-hour workouts, I fueled them like it was part of something larger, anything else like that. And it took a while for me to be able, I basically, like, when I started out, I had like my bottle of Marten and I would drink like half of it in the hour, and that was kind of where I would go. And then it got to the point where I would drink the whole thing and I would be totally fine, and then I could take in more. So a bottle and a half, even 2 bottles. And I got to the point where it's like you said, experimenting with like 120 and above too. So that's kind of the common assumption there with the glucose to fructose thing and GI distress.
Yeah, and it's definitely trainable. Like, that's, everybody should know it's trainable. Figure out where you are now and figure out where you would like to be for your goal event and start stepping up through the ratios and practicing.
Yeah.
The hard part is, like, I don't advocate 9-hour rides and training.
Yeah.
It's you're not going to know what you're going to feel like after 9 hours. And things change so much on race day. A lot of times you're changing humidity, heat, the effort level, like you stops and there's like something tasty.
Yeah. Right.
So inside of that, you just have to pay attention to how you feel. Look for the signs of gas. I lost and found I did too much, and I didn't eat for like 90 minutes, and then I started to feel better again, and then I started doing it. And for the solid or gels, it's going to be personal. For me, I'm just a gel and a drink person, because the chewing motion like puts me out of breath. It's like I'm like trying to breathe while I'm doing it, and I just it's like too much.
Can we cover the solid versus liquids thing? Like, it doesn't seem to make sense to me that, like.
Yeah. To me, there's people who, like Nate, I don't like chewing things while I'm actually working. It's really distracting. It takes a lot of mental energy. I start focusing on my breathing. You start paying attention to other things and you're distracted. For my soft rule is I eat solid until the gun goes off, until the whistle blows. And then I know what works. I know how my body reacts to it. And so I just go gel and blocks for no matter the duration, pretty much.
Yep.
And that's assuming that there's intensity. And now that I've ridden a Grand Fondo-like event, it's hard the whole time. Like, it's hard the whole time.
Yeah.
So there was never a time on the coast ride where I wanted to eat a solid bar.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
Never a time. And I think Nate was talking about it, where it's, you just wrap your head around, you're eating what you have to eat to get it done. And if it doesn't sound good, like, sorry, that's okay.
That's one thing I've learned in racing is, like, I read this from a lot of you that submit questions, which you can do, by the way, trainerroad.com/podcast. And thanks for doing that. Sometimes I read, like, people say, I know I should plan on this, but I just can't handle the thought of just drinking my calories that long, or I'll get palate fatigue, or any of those things. And, like, those things are real. I totally understand that. But for me, when I'm in a race, when I feel palate fatigue coming on, I'm like, you are much less important than my goal. So I'm going to let you sit to the side, and I'm just going to focus on my goal. Right?
I need variety. I can't, you're already doing an incredibly 9-hour, like you're sitting on a bike, but you can't have the same like 3 flavors.
Yeah, exactly.
Orange, lime, and I don't know, some other flavor for 9 hours.
So like let that sit to the side.
You're tougher
is
than
my
that.
advice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're tougher.
exactly. And there's bigger fish to fry.
For Dirty Kanza, if I get in, hopefully, please help.
Like a Dirty Kansas dance.
Yeah, if anybody knows how to help, like we don't, and that's something to say. Like we don't like play any cards to like get into like.
I'll play all the cards. but
like in this
I've already
case,
tried and nothing's happened.
yeah. No cards were played. This is genuinely we don't know if he's gonna get in. So.
So for Dirty Kanza, I'm gonna do just liquid, maybe with some gels in the pocket, but then. I'm having Jonathan there with, I'm going to have savory peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and Pringles, like salty, the opposite, as an emergency food. So if I go to these stops and I'm like, I can't do any of this, I just need this, and I'm having a horrible day, I'm going to sit down, have peanut butter and jelly, eat some Pringles.
Perfect.
Yeah, talk to you.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's really good to have that sort of thing in the backlog.
One last thing to consider is, generally speaking, on most long rides, you're limited by water. And solid food takes more water to digest, so you're like poking holes in your water bottles by eating solid food.
Yeah.
You're making your water not last as long, and that's what's going to really hurt you in the long run is not having water. And so don't do that.
and if you don't drink enough water, it not only lessens the effect of that, but also it causes GI distress.
Yeah, exactly.
You need a bike with 7 water bottle mounts.
Yeah, do they make one?
Oh boy, let's get into it. So, talking about long events, talking about Kanza, everything else.
Okay, before we do this, I got to say one thing.
Yeah, sure.
I did not say I'm going to beat Ted King.
Oh yeah,
at
we need to
Dirty
cover this.
Kanza.
Wait, you're going to beat Ted King?
So I said some things last time, and even one of our copywriters was like, "You so said you could climb with Ted King, or something like that." And I went back, looked at the video. I said if Ted King is doing, so Ted King's my size.
Yes.
If he is doing what I said, 280 watts or something,
275.
275 watts, I can do 275 watts. I have proof of that.
Yeah,
like
you
look
can. It's not that you have proof that you can beat Ted King. It's that you have proof that you can do 275
You guys can
watts.
both ride at 275 watts next to each other.
Yes. And the
This
idea
isn't
was
outlandish.
the
This is
idea
very
was
logical.
how hard do you go in the beginning of the race, and 275 watts will be way above my average or normalized power for the race. But like at Leadville, that was actually my ceiling elevation was don't climb at higher than 275 watts. So my point was at the race when it was going hard, if Ted King was going hard at 275 watts at my weight, and that was hard, well, I could probably go the same for that part of it.
If he's going 400 watts, that's a different story.
I actually said that later on the race,
Yeah.
that he was doing 400 watts for 10 minutes. I'm just not going to mean it. So I'm not even going to be close to Ted King.
Right.
There's no comparison.
No.
The dude's got like a 100-watt threshold higher than me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not beating Ted King. I don't know. Sometimes.
Oh yeah, our words get taken and ran with
misconstrued.
many times. This happens.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I just had to get that out.
Clarified. Very good. I'm glad that I forgot to put that down in the notes. I'm very glad that you did. So we should talk about a bike and what bike you're going to ride. So you have a specialized Crux that you've traditionally ridden for gravel races,
Or my mountain bike.
or your
Epic. Yep. Now I have the Pivot Mach 4 SL.
That's the one. So, but there's a new something else has caught your eye.
I talked about last time the Cannondale Topstone. I always say it wrong.
Yeah.
About being slacked out. A couple people, including Chuck Denise, said, "You want slack, baby? Check out this." It's the evil Chamois Hagar.
Yeah.
And every time I see that, I want to be like,
Yeah,
like do an
or
air
Halen.
guitar.
It
You have
should.
to, I think.
Producer Tucker, where's the guitar drop? We need it.
Okay, put this one up. This is
You can see it on the
extremely.
you can see it on the screen right now. Sorry, if you're
Yeah.
watching on YouTube, this is the benefit of watching on YouTube. You can see what we're talking about.
I put this up on Instagram as a story, and I got so many people just respond with no. Like, why would you do this? And I asked all of them, I said, why? And they're like, well, that's just a rigid mountain bike with a drop bar. And I'm like, yeah,
Sounds great.
That's exactly what I want. So I'm ordering this thing, and I am
Nice.
going to ride Chamois Hagar to on my gravel races. And the reason is, we'll get into more detail. Well,
Sure.
I want to talk about. Okay, first it can do 50C wheels.
Yeah.
So that's a little under 2.1 wheels.
And those are at 700, so not just 650B,
Yeah, those are
but 700
big wheels.
So that means really big clearance.
Yep.
And in Kansas, I don't need that. I'll probably do 38. But at other ones like Grinduro, oh yeah.
It'd be sweet to have.
Yeah, sweet to have. Lost and found. A lot of stuff over here is more technical gravel.
Yeah.
And another thing to say is gravel's different. So you might have smooth gravel fire roads everywhere you go, and you'd be like, Nate, why would you ever do that?
Yeah.
Gravel's different, so you can't say one is the other. But because you can get skinnier wheels, that's great.
Sure.
The head tube angle is 66.67.
Which is really slack. Should we describe what that is for people?
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, the head tube angle is imagine like Easy Rider, that old movie from the 70s where we're talking about like the Harleys that have like the forks that are pointing way out in front of you versus something like your road bicycle. And that road bicycle, the forks look like, like walrus tusks, basically pointing straight down to the ground, right? So a relaxed head tube angle is when they go further out in front of you. And basically that angle that you're drawing on the ground, if you were to like basically do some geometry, it would be broader if it's more slack. It's common to see downhill bikes be very slack, whereas something like a cross-country bike or a road bike is very upright or steep.
So what does the slack head tube do?
It will, and so it'll do a number of different things, but it's not the decider of the actual handling, and that's an important part to cover. But generally, what it will do is it will make you more stable when you're going through bumpy terrain, especially at speed. It will also make it so that when you do hit things, whether it's a rock or even washboard, it will have it won't toss your momentum or your weight forward quite as much. It won't want to stop you. It will want to roll over that a little bit easier. It'll also slow down the handling. It won't make it twitchy, which for something like cyclocross would not be great because you want to be able to do really tight little turns and have some really fast steering. But for a gravel race, I don't know, not many crucial turns.
Yeah.
Like,
There's not a lot of 180s.
Yeah.
Tight 180s.
Yeah.
You're not rubbing tape, right? Yeah. On like an S-turn section at Kansas. So that's usually what a head tube angle does. And it's worth saying that bikes are getting slacker and slacker and slacker in the off-road space as time is going on. And they're doing a number of different things to kind of counter that, but that's kind of what the story with head tube angle.
My layman's approach is when it's a slack head tube, it feels like it slows down the trail. So when you're going fast on something technical, it just feels slower. Even when it's not slower.
Feels more stable, more in control.
Yeah, and then the fear comes out of it. So when you say, Nate, why would you ever need this for a gravel race? Well, then gravel races, you're descending pretty fast.
Yeah.
And when it's twitchy and you're on that loose over hard, ooh, man.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it gets scary and you hit the brakes.
And also it's worth saying that has been a limiter of yours, relatively speaking, for since you've started. You've gotten, and I know that like people always assume that you're worse than you are. That's for sure the case, but especially now with mountain biking, like you're good.
Yeah, you're a good mountain biker now.
Yeah. So, but still, relatively speaking, it's still something that that if you shore that up, it's going to help your performance. Like that's a weakness that if you help with, it's going to be better.
It's the stress and the cortisol and like
it's
the
the
thinking
fear,
inside.
Really. It's
like when there's no fear, like it just becomes more fun too.
Yeah.
Side note, they said it's 66.67 head tube angle. Most people only do it to the first significant digit.
Yes.
But that would make it would be 66.7. I think evil.
Yes.
6667.
Yes.
They did that on purpose.
Clever. Yeah.
The other thing is it has a dropper post on it. So in my size, I get a 185 millimeter drop, which is awesome. So it's the GRX. I'm getting the GRX Shimano group set, which allows it to have, like you said before, a mechanical left dropper post. Other people said, why would you ever need a dropper post on gravel bike? People used to say it's too about mountain bikes. Why would you ever need a dropper post?
Yeah.
I think road bikes should have dropper post. Also, if you go to my Instagram, again, npearson99, you can see me on my cross bike. And where my saddle is compared to my handlebars,
it's insane.
It's insane.
Higher than you, bro.
Yes, the legs are very long. The center of gravity is high.
Than most people.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when I drop down my dropper post, I'm still higher than you.
You're like my shoulders.
No,
when you're dropped, your like hips are near my shoulders.
When I drop my dropper post
it's weird.
on my cross bike, my saddle height is the same as Chad's.
Yeah.
In regular life.
Yeah. So I mean that
Yeah.
it really helps, and I think there's no situation where being lower doesn't. I mean, descending doesn't help.
And this is one point that actually is inarguable. It's mathematical, right? Like you're lowering your center of gravity and it improves handling. And so that's not bad. I do understand that a dropper post is heavier, Yes, I understand that. But if you were to look at the benefit it could provide across the whole day, that's where you basically weigh it. Does it provide more benefit or does the weight worse? And that's going to depend on every person.
And you don't have to get behind the saddle in order, like, it's not really steep, like it's a 20% grade where you're getting behind the saddle for a dropper post to be
sure,
like to make it feel better. You're also more aero. So when you're going down and you like tuck, at least on a road bike, man, you can go like really fast.
Way faster.
Oh, yeah.
It's like being on your top tube.
Exactly.
But
People
without
do that.
having the lack of handling because you're on where your saddle should be. So
Yep.
I mean, as bikes get less and more weight, I think at first they're going to give us little drops, and then finally people will just give you all the way drops.
Yeah.
And then people are going to descend like they're on their top tube, drop down,
And be in control.
and kill it.
And it'll be
Like,
safe.
Yeah, it'd be safe and control, and they're going to drop other people, and then everyone's going to do it.
And you aren't going to have to use all that muscle strain that you do when you're on the top tube.
You can
and
feel it when you're on the top.
And they're going to be able
Oh,
to
yeah.
pedal.
Yeah.
Right?
That's-
So they're going to be able
that's
to pedal
my-
with their seat slammed.
This may be foolish of me, and sorry, we're departing a bit, but
Yeah.
anytime that we're descending on our top tubes, Pete and I do it regularly.
Yeah.
What I think of is like the gamble that I think of, and I know this is probably wrong, but I'm like, this is using a lot of like energy that I wouldn't use if I was just sitting on my saddle, because it does require because you don't have a seat to just perch your pelvis on, and as a
Yep.
result, you end up using more contraction. It's like there is a cost to it. So having a dropper post that went all the way down would be amazing.
So the other things about this bike, no toe overlap. I never hit my toes. I've got big feet. It's fine.
Yeah.
But you're not going to have any tight anyways, like turns.
Sure. Yeah.
7 bottle mounts, which
That's
I'm not going to
amazing.
put 7 model mounts on because there's ones on the fork, which I wouldn't do for aero.
Oh yeah.
But for Dirty Kanza, I might try to load liter bottles on this and carry 4 liters on the bike, just because not having it on your back helps with cooling,
Yes.
helps with aero, although I'll have an air putting on the frame, but I think it would probably be worse on my back.
We've talked about like
And
hydration.
just weight on your body.
Yeah.
Just
It's so we've talked about hydration packs before, and like the USWE packs are the ones that we use that are awesome because they never move around. Like you don't have that detriment of a pack. In fact, you kind of just don't notice it, but you do notice it after an hour of riding with a pack on your back or anything on your back.
13 hours.
Yeah. What about 12 or
And
13 hours?
added onto that, you're gonna notice it. Like
Yeah.
it has an effect, and then it also has an aerodynamic effect. You can't, even though these bags are really slim and low profile, it still has an aerodynamic effect. The one thing that's really nice about a hydration pack is you usually drink more often when you have
Yeah.
a pack because it's so easy to do, right?
I could do that.
Sure, you just stick to a schedule, right? Make sure that every 15 minutes, whatever it is,
The other things are, I forgot. But when people say, why don't you just get a hardtail mountain bike? That could be cool. Like suspension might be awesome, but this allows me to have a larger front chainring
Yes.
on this bike, and it's 142, which allows me to do gravel wheels and not mountain bike wheels.
Yeah. Yep.
And I can have a wide variety of wheels, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So for all the people screaming, why, Nate? Why?
Yeah.
Jonathan, why do you think, like, what am I losing on a slack bike like this compared to a more traditional road-like gravel bike?
You're losing your quicker handling, which in this case probably isn't important.
Gravel races, yeah. Why do you need quick handling?
Yeah.
You're probably losing in weight compared to a normal gravel bike.
I think the large out of the box on this is like 20 pounds.
Yeah, so you'll be losing some weight there. We might be able to.
Pounds, right?
Yeah, we might be able to trim something. And Kanza is not flat. It's
Yeah, it is
constantly
not
going
flat.
up and down, right? And then you're also losing, I assume, but I don't know. I assume because aerodynamics are a funny thing. I assume on the aero side you're also losing, but I don't know that because I don't know. So far yet, as of yet, I haven't seen companies jumping into aero optimizing gravel bikes yet. Marketing hasn't reached that point quite yet with them.
Not at the max capacity.
Yes, yeah. So those I see the main things that you could lose. Now, one thing that a lot of people say is you're going to have floppy steering with the front end because of the slack head tube angle.
Someone here said that.
So like basically, if a head tube angle is slack and then that's it, if you just take your current bike and you make it slacker. Then what that will do many times, it will make the feeling or make the steering feel like it wants to reside on one side or the other rather than stay straight. So it'll feel a bit wandery when you're trying to hold it straight, and then it will always want to flop from one side to the next. Now that's not just head angle dependent. So they do a number of different things with other metrics like fork offset and a few different things that they can do to basically make it so that even though a bike has a slack front end, it isn't slow in the steering department or isn't floppy. And in this case, the measurement that matters there is trail. And trail is actually a much better measurement of how a bike's going to behave, and better than head tube angle by far. So trails, basically, if you draw a line straight down, if you're watching on the podcast, you can see this, but try to imagine it with me. Draw a line straight down from the center of your head tube until it hits the ground and mark that point. Then draw another line straight down the forks all the way until that intersects with the ground, and then measure the distance between those 2 points. Mm-hmm. So just as like an example, the Specialized Diverge has a 56 millimeter trail. The Venge has a 52 millimeter trail. Once again, we're talking upright, right? So that makes sense, like a steep head tube angle on a road bike. The Epic Hardtail has a 101 millimeter trail, and then this has a 93 millimeter trail. So even though this thing is way slack, like way slacker than all of those bikes by a lot, I think that the Epic Hardtail is a 70 degree head tube angle, somewhere around there, or 69 something. But even though it has all of that, the trail is still shorter. So that means that the bike is still going to handle relatively well.
Yeah, when you think of a cross-country mountain bike still handles well. Like if you ride your SP100 on the road, it handles well.
Really well.
You're not worried about any of those angles.
Yep.
It's going to feel just like that.
Yep.
I would say, too, even my SB150, I've done the Tahoe Trail course, which is pretty much a gravel course with a couple single-track sections.
Yeah.
That I did not experience that. Then I climbed with downhill bikes. Totally experience it. Mm-hmm. And it's floppy, like you don't know where anything's going. Speaking of which, this could be pretty fun to ride at Tahoe Trail 100.
I think it'd be a great mountain bike. Like I'd be curious to see, because they have the fork length and then also the offset of the fork. Those two things really change the trail of the bike there and change how it feels. But one of the things I would say is, like, if this bike had like a short fork, like 40 millimeter travel, maybe 100 millimeter travel, it actually would make probably a really good hardtail.
What do you think about this, though, as just the way it is at Tahoe Trail 100?
Yeah, if you run big tires,
I
they're
think
pretty comfy.
That's the suspension, right?
Because you don't need full suspension at that course. That course is smooth.
Yeah, there's a couple sections that are like 3 or 4 minutes long.
Yeah.
But everything else is smooth.
Very smooth. So yeah, it could be a good Tahoe Trail.
That idea.
Course.
I would love to watch you ride that at Tahoe Trail.
That'd be awesome.
People of the world, you should ride your Chamois Hagar at Leadville for sure. I think that it would be like a
really.
Yeah,
I don't think so.
I think
we even talked about not having. There's too many rough spots, I think, at Leadville.
If you, well, I guess there's two ways to think of it, right? Like if you're really running big tires on this thing, and you're running some cush stuff on there, because you could probably run like. If you ran 27.5s with some really fat tires, I don't know what the clearance would be in that case. But if you did that, you might be able to get by.
Ooh, so are you saying...
I just think that it would break people's brains. I think that would be great.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
So are you saying then people should run hardtails at Leadville?
No, I mean...
But then a fully rigid bike is yes?
So no, I want people to break people's brains
okay, cool.
by using this.
Especially with an evil brand.
Oh, for sure, right? Yeah. Like it fits well. But no, I think that... So like this is the principle in this regard for this bike and for Leadville. And I think we're going to find this out as time goes on, as we get a better way to be able to measure energy preservation and loss between the bike and the rider over time. Yeah. I think that we're going to see that a compliant bike actually provides for a faster time than a bike that is more efficient, stiff, and rigid. Even though, like, for road, that's one thing when you're dealing with a very smooth surface. But even then, if it's a long day... I bet that compliance actually, because there's less wear and tear on the body and you're able to maintain more. So for Leadville, that's why I think a full suspension, honestly, all trolling aside, a full suspension bike is the one to use. And for something like Kanza, I don't think a rigid cross bike or gravel bike is the best one to have. I bet something like this with more compliance built in, just with that slack head tube angle, more stability, the bigger volume tires, I bet that's going to be better.
And then I'm going to do the Envy gravel bars, which they flare out. Mm-hmm. And the cool part about that is you get multiple hand positions. So as the day goes on, I can start going wide. I can kind of like from the bottom and just move around a bunch.
It's so helpful.
And the Envy G23 wheels, those are 23 internal diameter and a little more compliant, I believe, on the gravel ones.
Yeah.
So they should be the right size for like running the 38s up to 50. I think it's up to 50, somewhere around there. And then for another thing on compliance, it's really compliant bike is great, and this one's, I guess, mid-level for compliant. But your tire pressure makes up for
a huge difference.
Yeah, so much more of it. So if I run a little bit less, it's going to make up for all the compliance for the bike. Just by having the right tire pressure, and I'll probably go fairly low.
One thing that, because I'm sure their Envy attracts hate like no other brand I've ever seen.
Really? Envy does? Oh,
yeah,
I'm not
yes.
being sarcastic.
Yeah.
Is that because it's expensive?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And people, and we've even had people be like, because we talked to them on the podcast one episode, and people are like, oh, you guys are in bed with Envy, and we absolutely are not in any way. To be clear, as an industry member, we usually get industry purchase on things, but that's as far as it goes. So that's like on your Evil. That's probably what you'll do, I assume, for any product that we usually get. That is a perk of being in the bike industry. But we don't have any sort of relationship with them. All of that said, one thing that I find is that, so I've ran a bunch of different carbon components from different companies, aluminum components. And the one thing that I find to be like, I don't think Envy is the lightest for sure.
No.
Definitely not the cheapest.
Definitely not the cheapest.
But the one thing that I find is that they behave well. And like, in other words, like the ride characteristics and flex characteristics are like spot on. They're well tuned so that it's not like abusive. I remember I had like some Truvative mountain bike handlebars, and I had them on a hardtail, and I remember like genuinely feeling like the leaf spring action of like my bars like snapping back into place and bouncing around. It was terrible. Made the handling bad. But in this case, like they're really good at making things respond well. And on a day like Kansas, I feel like that's super important. If you have something that's like carbon, so it satisfies whatever boxes you're trying to satisfy, but it doesn't behave well, all of those bumps are just going to wreck you. By
predictable, right? Envy is always predictable and reliable.
Yeah, that's why you want that.
Yeah.
Right. So whatever, and if there's other brands or other components, or if you're sitting there, you're thinking like, should I run that stem, or should I run this stem, or should I run this saddle or that saddle, whatever else. On a day like that, you want to go for something that's going to behave well and be compliant throughout the whole day, not be something that's going to just beat you up.
Plus, I think it looks cool.
Helps.
Oh,
right?
people are going to like...
Some people think it's cool, other people roll their eyes.
Oh, yeah. People right now are like smashing things because we're talking about this bike.
Yeah, an Evil Chamois Hagar with Envy stuff.
Oh, you're basically playing a bingo game and you blacked out. So
with a dropper post.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And 6 bottle mounts.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Or 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're also going to be have Aero apparel on as well.
Skin
Oh,
suit.
a skin suit and an Aero helmet.
Yeah, perfect.
It's perfect. Oh, man,
if you
it's
had
a
Aero
bingo.
bars on there, man.
Yep.
that
No
would be
Aero bars.
I know, but that would be the final bingo.
Bring the hate at npearson99 on Instagram. Bring the hate. Okay, Matt. And for what it's worth, because people have asked me too, like what I thought about that bike, and I think that it's silly for us to decide that a gravel bike is this or a gravel bike is that, because it needs to be kind of a different things for different people. And like you said, it varies a lot.
Different gravel.
Yeah,
Yep.
and we've approached this from the direction of like road bike companies designing a road bike for gravel, right? And then these guys are coming at it from the perspective, Evil is saying like, this is a mountain bike designed for gravel, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like causing like a lot of unrest, it seems. But the main thing that's super important to keep in mind is you should buy a bike that helps, that kind of shores up weaknesses and makes you a better overall whole. And I think the majority, at least from my perspective, when I go to gravel races, the majority of people racing them are roadies. They're the minority are mountain bikers. Mm-hmm. So in that case, generally, it's fair to assume that the roadies don't have as much familiarity with off-road terrain and handling their bike in varied circumstances like that. So you should be looking for a bike like this that is a bit more compliant or a bit more capable on the handling side, rather than something that might punish your lack of handling skills if you find yourself in that situation.
People say this in the forum too, like if you're not turning a lot or the turns are big and sweeping, why would you not want a bike like this?
Yeah.
Like why would you want something that's going
Upright,
to feel a little
twitchy.
more ice skatey
Yeah.
on loose over hard?
Especially when you're talking washboard at speed over sharp rock and stuff like that. That's where you want stability.
I understand the pound or two difference, but really gravel bikes they're heavier.
Yeah,
they have bigger
light.
wheels, bigger tires.
Yeah.
And two, that 20 pounds out of the box is with 50s on it.
Yeah.
So you could get 38s and probably take half a
some weight
pound,
off. Yeah.
maybe even a pound.
Yeah, you can
I'm
drop
not sure.
quite a lot.
And then the other one is some aero stuff.
Yeah.
But still, gravel, you're usually not going that fast. But I do understand with Kansas, you're into a headwind, you're by yourself. That could be 30 miles per hour.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, it kind of reminds you of like that Trust suspension fork that came out. Like, there's no way that I think anybody can argue that a linkage suspension design is worse than just like telescoping forks. Like, it's more dynamic, it's more capable. But I'm not going to put one on my bike because, and just like I'm probably not going to get the Evil Chamois Hagar because, unfortunately,
that's you.
vanity plays an entirely too dominant role in my decision making process.
You know,
So
you look
yeah.
back at history for cycling. I don't need index shifting, right?
Yeah,
Like
totally.
It's fine.
Yeah. Aero bars, that's for triathletes.
And they think like
aero helmet?
Yeah.
No way.
No way we would do that.
Yep.
And they think like the shifters that are so big up in the front and putting that looks disgusting. I'd rather just have it on my frame. And now we look at that and we think, ugh, why would you put it on your frame? So
they all say
tastes and
why.
preferences change over time.
Well, yeah, it's something that we look back and be like, what if all of these? What's the famous guy who lost to Greg LeMond? If he would have had,
Laurent Fignon.
Yep, he would have had an aero helmet or aero bars. He would have won.
Yeah,
easy.
Yeah,
right.
I know what she would have chose. Now looking back,
Yeah.
been like, yes, sign me up.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, tire pressure too.
Totally.
Oh yeah.
Like
running
that's
140 psi.
and people just go no, and you
Yeah.
say why, and that's because it's the way we do it.
It feels faster. Nate.
Tradition.
Well, yeah, it's tradition, or it's usually an emotional response in your gut.
Yeah.
And you're like, that doesn't look like everything else where everyone else does. That's not what the current pros do. Therefore, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Triathletes don't feel that. They're like, oh, where's the data? It's 3
Yeah.
watts. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Like, come on, let's go.
Which I hope that like us podcast listeners on here can be like the open-minded people that are objective about
Besides you.
things. Yeah. Beside me. If
Well,
it looks bad, it's
he
him.
acknowledges that it is better, but he won't do
he
it.
understands. He's self-aware.
This is true. Yes.
But maybe
exactly.
Open comes out with one of these bikes someday.
Yeah,
He'll be like,
be
yeah,
fun.
yes,
Sure,
I'll do
right?
right at it.
Sounds like I already ordered one.
I honestly, if you were to say, like, you had a choice to get a chamois Hagar or a gravel bike, like and I have an open wide right now, which I don't love the geometry on that. I feel like it could be better for sure. If it was like a choice between that right now, I'd probably get the chamois Hagar. Honestly, like if it was between the two of them. So yeah, this just is what
What's
it
up,
is.
bro?
Yeah, you and I, chamois Hagar bros.
Or just evil too.
Yeah.
I can't wait for you guys to have ass kickers.
Yeah, exactly. Matt says, there's been a lot of great strategy and tactical advice about breakaways on the podcast, but I've noticed it's almost always from the perspective of the person in the break. And by definition, most people aren't in the break most of the time. So can you give some advice for a Cat 4 looking to upgrade who didn't make the break? So yeah, this is a good point. Also, Matt, I'm almost always the guy I feel like that misses the break too. I feel like everybody probably feels that way because, like you said, more often than not, we are not in the break because there are a few people in the break.
This is my worst fear.
Missing the break.
Yeah.
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 Nate always points, like we've talked about races. He's like, yeah, but if the break goes, then like the race is over.
And I drove 6 hours for
to
10
ride around
minutes
in
of
the pack.
racing.
It's frustrating, and that's one downside. If you're gonna have teammates, think about that. Like, do you really want to put yourself in a situation where you have teammates, so you may have to just sit back and ride? It's up to you.
A lot
No
of teammates
teammates?
say no. I'm not going to do that.
They're still teammates.
Yeah, they're still teammates and they still do that.
Yeah. So, what tips would you give for somebody that, when you aren't in the break, what do you do?
Yeah,
when you miss it.
I think there's a period in time directly after the break goes where it's still susceptible to being bridged or brought back. And so you have to kind of throw all your matches, all your bullets, all your cannonballs, whatever you have for that next 5 minutes, and you have to also capitalize on the way you're going to get across. Like Nate's a good example where he's kind of going to go Hail Mary, 60-second effort, 90-second effort. So that means he actually has to respond sooner than like I would. Like I would want to get across in probably 2 laps, 5 minutes or something like that. And so that's where you pick the way you're going to get across and the timing in the amount of the time the break has. So if the break has 20 seconds, that's ideal for Nate. Nate can do 20 seconds.
I can do either.
Well,
I was just going to say, maybe Nate's entirely shifted his power profile, and everybody that feels like they know how Nate's going to race when Nate races this weekend, you maybe just don't know how he's going to race.
If you're concerned about me in this weekend, you're going to lose because this is a P12 race, and
I'm trying to throw something into the
no, but
spokes here.
I think the power profile, it depends on how far they are. So if they're 20 seconds up, I think that's when you should go like an 800-watt digger for a long time and try to like really bridge it quickly, just pretty much get it over. But if it's 5 minutes, you got to pace it differently.
Yeah, and definitely it always matters. Capitalize on other people doing the same thing you are. And in that short period of time, once the break is gone, it's always gone, right? It's never going to fall apart, and people aren't going to magically get motivated in the last 20 minutes of a race. That never happens.
So all three of us actually in the racing that we've done, I know it's going to change this year for you probably, Nate, but all three of us in the racing that we've done locally or I guess for Nate and I, period, but for you just locally, we tend to be marked riders, right? So this is a bit of an exception. So in many cases, if we miss the break and we're back with the pack, a lot of the time people just look to marked riders to make the sort of move. But something that's important for you to remember, even if you are the marked rider, you are not the only person that wants to chase the breakdown. Mm-hmm. And they're just waiting for somebody to make a move. Everybody is. And if you wait just a little bit longer, chances are somebody else is going to make that move. I feel like that's one good thing, is to remind yourself that it's not entirely up to you, and chances are somebody else wants to do it. Because, it helps so much when you can just latch onto a wheel instead of being the person that makes it happen.
And you can stir the pot too. If you have 5 minutes until the break gets too far ahead for you to chase down, you can do some probing attacks just to stir things up and make people kind of react to you and activate a little bit. And even if there's a team controlling the front of the race, definitely attack, because you want to upset their kind of control that they have on the front of the field. But you only have the fuse is lit, so you only have 5 minutes or 10 minutes to do this, and you have to kind of put all your eggs in that first basket to get across.
Yeah,
I think a crit is different than a road race too. If you're in a road race, I've definitely had it. You're riding solo probably in a Cat 4, and talk to people and try to organize. Say, hey, does anyone want to work together, pull these guys back? Mm-hmm. And oftentimes there'll be 4 or 5 people. Yes. Yeah. And this isn't a race ending. Like you can work together and you can still win the race and bring it back.
For sure.
We're in a crit too. If it's going really fast, I find it's harder to organize people.
Yeah.
To pull people back. So do that. And also, if you can't organize people, I think go for the Hail Mary solo bridge.
Yeah.
And if it's long out there, some people know. If someone comes with you, awesome. Yeah. But if no one goes with you, get a good workout.
What would you say about this tactic, Pete? I've seen some people not be... So, let's say a break goes up the road, and then what you have is a group of riders after that are in the large group, and a handful of them that are throwing out attacks to try to get across, but as soon as other people latch on, they kind of ease up and they don't want to do it. So you have a handful of attackers, and then I've seen some people play the role of the bridge, like the glue, so to speak, so that in between those attacks, they're fine with sitting on the front and carrying a good pace. Mm-hmm. Is that a good strategy to do? Because I assume their intent is not let the break get too far away while these shenanigans play out. So should we be that person, or is that not advisable?
I think being the glue is the worst spot to be. I do think that there is kind of that magical land if the break is gone and the field shuts down, being that solo, even if you are solo bridging for the last half of the race, a lot of the time that's a more successful strategy than sitting in. A lot of time you don't get brought back and you just sit in no man's land and you race the next half an hour or 2 hours by yourself.
Speaking of power profile, in a 35 plus Cat 4 race that happened, and after 4 hours of racing, I did 15 minutes at 360 something, and I solo bridged to a breakaway and I won. And there's a video called "What to Do When You Bridge to a Breakaway."
Yep.
But people actually, when I left too, talk about the strategy after the race. They're like, "We didn't think you were going to make it, so we didn't go with you."
Yeah, when one rider's up the road, they're like, "Fool's errand, let that guy go." Like that's silly. But a lot of the time, if you are that rider, let's say you do bet on yourself and you're trying to make it across, you might as well bet on yourself, first of all, rather than betting on other people. And then the other side of it, if it becomes apparent to the rest of the group that you are going to make it, chances are they're going to try to then end up getting close to you if you're still in sight, like at a criterium. So then at that point, if they are getting close, you can rest up for just a little bit on your effort, and then you have more people to kind of launch with. So it's really, kind of like you have a backup plan with it.
Another thing for lower categories is when you're look at where the other races are, and you got to be looking behind you, because I've had this happen where you get passed by another group and then you get neutralized, and if there's a break off the front, it is so frustrating because
you can't catch them.
You can't catch them. You get close. We had that where a Masters group was doing one less lap than us, so they were on the last lap. We had another lap. The break was off and they had like a minute, which is already a big amount.
Yeah.
And then they went by, and we had to ride for like 10 or 15 miles. They went by us quickly, and then they sat up, and the race official wouldn't let us repass them.
It's
and
like the worst scenario.
And I had just organized chase, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do 300 watts and just like pull for as long as I can. And we had to wait, and they got like a 4 minute. It was like something crazy, but we still caught them in the end.
Yeah.
But I put out so much energy for that catch. But the other thing is good too. If you think the Masters group's going to catch you, or especially when there's different amounts of laps, because they will go faster on the last lap.
Yeah.
Is you go on the attack where you think it's going to happen, and you can take advantage of that. It's just that's the way it is, and it would be nice if that wouldn't happen, but
Sure.
I mean, it's frustrating, right? I think it's happened to Brandon Nee, lost overall, right?
A stage race because of it twice.
Yeah.
And it was Brandon style, like only 8 races for the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Brandon life.
They got neutralized though with like just a couple miles to go when they were like 20 seconds up the road.
Yep. And then they get 2 minutes, and then he loses the overall.
I struggle to ever say poor Brandon because of like, that guy's walk KG and everything else.
Yeah,
but he certainly works for it too.
Yeah,
but
he does.
Poor Brandon. Yeah.
But yeah, I think don't, just because the break goes overall, you still have like 5 strategies to implement, and figuring out the best strategy for you based on the race and the amount of time left and the type of rider you are.
Yeah. And the last thing is, points aside, because I've been in the way where you're just like, I need the points, so you want to bring them back, and you kind of get desperate. One of the videos we had me doing that. But if not, just reset. Pretend they're not in the race. Okay, this is the new field. Let's practice some things. I'm going to race this like it is the whole peloton.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a good way to kind of like salvage the race, right?
Yeah, and you can still win from a field sprint, or you can attack them and win from them.
Sure, and at the very least, you can learn stuff.
Exactly,
and get in a good
workout and experience.
Yep. So with that, can we transfer into the race that we have this weekend? We haven't talked about it all podcasts so far.
Yeah, bro.
So on Saturday, we're going to be racing the Cal Aggie Criterium, which you can see we've done quite a few videos from that one. If you go to youtube.com/trainerroad in our race analysis channel, you can see a handful of videos that we did from Land Park. That's like the park that we race at, and there's a few different races that happen there every year.
Cal Aggie or Land Park.
Yep. Yeah. So with this race, it's basically like and you'll see the race analysis videos and everything else, but it's a pretty straightforward course with just one chicane in it, and it's probably going to be raining everything else.
Not for you, for Pete and I.
You guys,
it looks like it's getting pushed back. I think we're getting closer.
So your mountain bike race is going to be rainy the next day for you.
I think it's going to start raining at 7 p.m.
So we're going to get into like setting expectations. So first of all, one question that I know I hear somebody saying right now, like, what the heck are you doing racing so early? Because, it's early season, and we're already starting racing.
It's called race season.
Race season starts.
Yes,
Kaboom.
right now. And yes, there is a risk. The risk, like a lot of people say, like January 0, July 0, whatever else it is. But racing, I find, is, especially when you're talking criteriums, not stuff that's going to be super damaging and derailing to your plan. I like incorporating it as often and as early as I can in my training. You guys are the same?
Mountain biking too. Actually, there was a mountain bike race 2 weeks ago. I wasn't available to do that one, but I wish I could have done that one because it's just that, like, I pushed myself really hard in that like anaerobic capacity, and I feel like I get a good bump of anaerobic if I do a race earlier on.
Yeah, agreed.
Just as a C race. I don't change my training for it. It just pops in for another anaerobic ride. We talked about it before, and I get a little bit of bump, especially going down to sea level.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that C race, exactly. It just replaces a hard workout. You also get to practice racecraft, which is like just
super important.
And starting that earlier, it gets like your motor spinning up for racing. If you race 3 or 4 times before your first B event, your brain is going to be that much sharper and more capable to race.
Yeah, it's a big thing. And for me, I find that racing criteriums are a really big help for racing mountain bikes because it is similar in terms of like energy system demand on your body. And also it's really good tactical practice because mountain bike races many times can become tactical, depending on where you're racing at with the people you're racing with.
For you.
Yeah, so, but they can, is the point. So, like, it's not like it's an entirely separate discipline. So, it's definitely something to consider. Now, how do you manage expectations, though, for first race of the season? Because you've asked me, Nate, you're like, what are you going to, or what are your,
I want you to win.
So, yeah. Did you say what's your goal, or, like, how are you going to win?
How are you going to win?
I think that's what he said.
Because we're not sure.
Yeah, so I always struggle with expectations first race of the year. How do you manage those, Pete?
I think you should just capitalize on the fact that you get to race. Everybody's been training. It doesn't really matter what your training is versus everybody else's. It matters that you capitalize on what you're good at. You don't do anything. You don't want to repeat mistakes you've made in the past. You want to kind of move forward as a racer. You just work on getting better as a racer, and for you that means winning. That's fine.
So like I don't want this is great. Everybody that's going to be racing me is listening to this, I'm sure. But for me it's hard for me to put like all my chips onto a result in terms of like a relative outcome to everybody else, like a placing. But it is to that point, like you said, don't make the same mistakes that I made last year. Don't do that sort of thing. Be a smarter racer. I find like that sort of stuff, if I focus on those more process-oriented goals of what I can control there, then I think, number one, that's the best way to get to a good result. But for me, it's really hard to just say, like, win the race right out on the first race, because I have no clue who I'm going up against, how it's changed. But once I get a few races into the season, then that's where I start to feel more comfortable with, like, a result. And, like, kind of like saying, like, this is what I want.
No, dude.
But how do you manage it, Nate?
Well, I'm going to try to do my best, and...
because you're racing a different category, you'll be P1 too.
Yeah, and this is a whole another type of thing. I've raced a few Cat 1 riders in Reno, national champs and stuff, and I've raced national and world champs in Masters 1, 2, 3. So it's not completely 35 plus though.
Yeah.
It's not completely different, but it is completely different because of the size of teams and the depth is different.
And the skill, the individual skill of the riders too.
It's the pop, the depth, and the teams, which is not the same. And I just say it again, if you're racing to beat me, that's dumb. But for everyone, for the whole season, I'm not going to win a field sprint. I'm probably not going to win a breakaway sprint. But I just want to get points. And if I am in a breakaway with you and you're working, I will work. I am a good draft, and I can put out a lot of power for a long time.
It's true.
So, and you watch the videos, you can probably outsprint me. So I am a ideal breakaway partner. And if you, so we don't even need to
pretty well.
You don't even need to attack me with like laps to go. Let's just go to the end, and you'll straight up outsprint me. And if you are chasing, there's no point because you're not going to catch us. So
yeah, there you go.
But if we're going hard, I mean, you're going to put out 450 for 5 minutes to be able to catch us if we have a gap and I'm working with other people who are committed.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So just like the last question, just pretend that's a new Peloton. No, but really, so basically, it's so tough because worst fear is letting the brake go, but I can't go with every brake. And it's got to be the right amount of people.
Especially now with such a strong and deep field.
Well, and I think that's perfect for you, right? Like using these early season races to fine tune your breakaway finding ability and to be able to put down the right amount of power and the right brakes to get away. Mm-hmm. It is a skill. It's another skill that you have to practice.
Tough skill. And a lot of times too, the result will be the reaction from the field and not my performance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I could do everything perfectly, but if the field doesn't want that to happen, I'm not going to, we can't, I mean, I'm joke. We can't pull, 8 people can pull us back, right? Or even 2 riders who are really dedicated, they're going to blow themselves up.
Sure.
Can pull back a group of 4.
Yeah.
Anybody.
Yep. Let's go into some live questions that we have from Michael.
I want to put one thing.
Oh, yeah.
The mountain bike race, I'm putting cameras on it,
true,
and Jonathan's going to critique my racing.
It's going to be awesome.
We're not going to be able to record the whole race, but really after the beginning, you get separated. So it's going to be a lot about line choice, initial placement inside of like the Peloton and Peloton. The group.
And the beginning of the race is going to be like a key thing. I assume we'll spend a lot of time on that.
How I pass people. There's like 2 technical spots. Everyone else, they're not technical. That I do so poorly on every single year, and hopefully I can get some tips from you. So
nice.
That'll be awesome to get those up.
Cool. Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. So stay tuned for the race analysis that we'll have from all the different races.
I think we're having like 6 or 7 of them.
Yeah, and since Simon is not, or my son, he's not going to be coming and he won't be going to the zoo.
You're going to race the P1, 2, 3?
I think I'm going to do it.
We all get to race together.
Yeah, so it'll be pretty fun.
I've got a part. Will you work for me, or you try to win?
Yeah, because it'll be my 3rd race for the day. So, yeah, I don't know.
It's going to be awesome.
I don't think that I'll be in the challenge.
I have another question for you, Pete. Are you racing against me, or are we gonna like?
Do you have a Cliff Bar kit?
Are more Cliff Bar people gonna be there?
I'm not. I think only a couple of us are coming. I think we're friends in the Peloton. I wouldn't.
Are you gonna pull me back?
No,
that means no. That means no, right there.
I want to be in the break with you, right? And we don't care that much about the result, but we want to race hard, and we'll throw our eggs into the breakaway basket with you. How about that?
So if there's like 3 people in a break, is Cliff Bar going to line up and chase us back if they're not in the break, or are you going to let someone else chase back and then counter?
Probably let someone else chase back and counter.
So let's not talk about our tactics. Let's keep those on the down low.
Which riders are going to be there?
I'm not sure. I'll find out.
Okay, and then if we are this isn't going to happen. But Pete, if we were 2 up at the end, never going to happen, everybody. But if we I need these points, you gonna give it to me, or we're just gonna race each other?
No, I
say we race each other.
I think we say we're gonna race each other, and then I'll lose my shifting right at the end, and Nate beat me.
The other thing, I think, if we are in it, I would not attack you at the end. Like, it's better for us to have a good result and not get the breakaway taken back than that. But if we are in it together in some kind of breakaway, which I'm just going to get dropped in the first 10 minutes, everyone's just going to laugh at me. I know these are all like pie in the sky things. Everyone
why not think through all the scenarios?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If we are in a group and I attack, you counter that.
Yeah, I'm not going to chase you.
Or the other way around.
Yeah.
In a breakaway.
Yeah. There's definitely a difference between being friends in the peloton, being teammates, and racing against someone. Yeah. Right? And you're a good friend in the peloton.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm your boss too.
That helps. It's like, who signs my paycheck again? Like,
law laid down right there.
Just kidding, Pete. You can beat me.
All right.
It's a better video if you try.
For sure. Yeah. Michael's question says, I'm a 33-year-old getting into cycling for weight loss. However, I'm also very interested in crit racing eventually. Would it be better to simply put miles in on the bike or begin a structured plan? Begin a structured plan.
Yeah, start training.
Yeah.
There's no point to practice training before you train.
You don't need to train. Yes. Yep. Chad always says.
Get into it, and it's not because the structure will all be adjusted to your fitness level anyway. So yeah, it'll probably feel hard at first if you're new to riding because it's just it's hard work. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that it's bad for you. It just means that it's good. And if anything, having a structured plan will make sure that you're progressing like at a good rate. And if you're just riding, it's way easy to just go in way too hard, way too quick.
Yep. Yeah, you're saving yourself by starting structuring training.
Yep. Charlie says, question for the TR folks. Do any of you use oval chain rings? If so, what power meters do you use? Thank you.
I think only Chad.
Only Chad. I have used them on road and on cross and on my mountain bike, and now I'm all on round. I honestly, I've talked about this before, in terms of using oval rings. I think that if you have a mountain bike, like a full suspension mountain bike that is prone to a lot of pedal bob because it needs chain tension to be able to keep the suspension stable, then an oval ring can really help because it can actually kind of offset that and it can smooth it out a little bit better. So like when I had the previous generation Yeti ASR, it benefited from that a lot. On the SB100, it does not benefit from that. And I just don't really like the feeling of the oval rings. But in terms of what power meters you use for them, there's a lot of, depending on like where the oval's orientation and the shape, it will give you different power meter data. And in fact, we've had employees here that have gone like back and forth, and they get like crazy power numbers from one to the other.
You get higher numbers with oval chain rings.
Yep, in almost every case. I don't know if you could orient it in some way that it wouldn't be, but
Chad uses oval chain rings.
But it basically it has like a higher spike of force every pedal rotation, and as a result, that generally drags, I think, the force bit up a little bit.
I don't know. Yeah.
That's at least from what's been explained to me from Rotor. They explain that, I think, is why like you'll see things change. But you can run them. Just know that you shouldn't compare it to your round data. It'll just be different.
Yeah.
So
and then for brands, you should look at whatever brand you want to go with. Look at the manufacturer and see if they support oval chain rings.
Yes,
that's what I would say.
Yep. Okay, Tyler says, just did triathlon plan builder, and due to family life, I needed to alter it. Is it important to keep the preset layout, or can you spread things across as long as it means you can be consistent?
I want to talk about a new feature.
Oh, don't do it. Don't do it.
Okay.
Yeah, don't do that yet.
Yes, you can edit it.
Totally. And
you won't die.
Yeah, and if you're talking about like removing something where it's like an entire week and trying to fit it into another week, that's not advisable. In that case, what you can do is you can just push your week down. And that's like basically in the week in the calendar, there's 3 dots over on the side. You can just basically push or pull a week of training, and it will scoot everything appropriately. But if you're talking about rearranging within a week, absolutely. That's totally fine. And please do that. That's,
you have to get
we designed it for that.
Exactly. And if you have to get rid of your Thursdays for some reason, make sure that Thursdays are the easiest days and get rid of that and go through that.
Cunio says, I will have a 6-hour circuit road race. 6 hours. I hope that that's not a circuit race, because a circuit race is usually really hard.
Yeah.
Like they're usually like kind of undulating and intense.
Look what he says.
Oh, what pacing strategy do you suggest? There's some serious ups and downs. Maybe VO2 max on the uphill and keep coasting on the downhill. I don't think this is sustainable.
Yeah,
I think
it's
you're right,
No.
Cunio.
So on a circuit race, you got to stay with the pack.
Yeah.
You can't pace. Your pacing is not that. So
Yep.
the tips on this is to one, side climb as much as you can. So if you come in the beginning of the climb and drift back, and two, know that it's not going to be that hard the entire race.
Yes.
The first laps are going to be the hardest, and it's probably going to be mellow, and then the last lap is going to be hard, but probably not in the same power as the first 2 laps. Is that your experience too with circuit races?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, and if you're also, so if this is 6 hours long, I mean, chances are you're going to have an IF of somewhere around 0.7. So when you're going up that climb first lap and it's way over your threshold, don't worry. Like
That's okay.
nobody can actually hold that. So it will drop down eventually.
I think how people do it is you'll get broke. They'll try to break as many people early on as they can.
Yes.
And then it will be sustainable. But all the people that are off the back aren't coming back.
Yeah.
Probably. Because you get mentally broke.
Yeah, when you talked about sag climbing, I just want to reiterate, you move to the front to allow yourself to drift back over the course of the climb.
Yep.
And then that does mean that when you get over the top, you will have to,
reaccelerate.
You'll have to reaccelerate and you'll have to do a little bit of work, but it's probably going to be less overall wattage and less strain on your body to do that than it is to push really hard up the climb with everybody.
It takes more. You don't have to go up the hill as fast.
Correct.
So instead of a 30-second climb, it's a 35-second climb, or
33. Yeah.
And that allows you to go at a lower wattage.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, that's what I would recommend. Question from Jason: racing on recovery week, yay or nay? Depends on the race.
Yeah.
I do Tuesday nights on my rest weeks all the time.
Yeah, Tuesday night races like local crits, that sort of stuff. Yeah,
Even if it's a C race,
sure.
Racing's fun.
Yeah.
The one thing what you have to balance is the fact that like if you're particularly fatigued and you know that this is something that's going to make your once again the next week's workouts tough or the next 3 weeks workouts tough, don't do it.
Yeah.
But if you know that that's something that's manageable and you've padded things in intelligently with a bit of wiggle room, probably can.
And you might have to then. I feel like what you're doing is either you're extending your build to that Tuesday, or you are ending your recovery later on.
Yeah.
So if it's right in the middle, that's kind of weird. But if it's at the end, so it's like let's say it's the Saturday of recovery week or the Sunday. To me, that's like ideal.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I might switch some of those aerobic rides with like a taper workout, which is a hard, intense workout, and kind of. But Pete talks about not having been fresh for the end of a rest week. That could be super awesome. And extending your week by a day or two, that could be super awesome too. And you could push it on the other side. In the middle, I would just make sure you just don't have too much fatigue for the week. So I'd probably rest a little bit coming in and then rest a little bit more coming out, so that you're really fresh and you can handle that next block of training after you come out. If you're going to race more than that, like you're probably going to need another recovery week. You're probably just adding an extra week of stress. It's like you're having a 4 or a 5 week block instead of a 4 week block.
One quick thing, and then we're going to run through a few more questions here. One quick thing that drives me nuts. I've seen plenty of people do this. They show up at like a race and they say, "Oh yeah, it's my rest week, so I'm not gonna be a factor." Don't do that. Like if it's a race, chances like why are you going there if you're planning on maintaining the rest week
just
intensity?
Just gonna soft pedal the whole time.
Yeah, like it never happens. You're gonna race hard. You're gonna do it. That's just how you're a bike racer.
Have you ever been on a race where you don't hear at least one excuse?
Oh,
preemptively.
Oh,
yeah,
throwing
preemptively.
them out. Yeah,
all the time.
Ever?
No.
Pete, have you ever heard it?
No,
Never.
never. It's everybody has excuses.
Have you ever given an excuse?
I really try not to.
But you have.
I have, yeah, for sure. But that's like as I race more, I realize that excuses aren't excuses. It's just the way things are.
Yeah.
Nobody's
perfect.
I think it is let's not give ourselves excuses in our heads where we say, "Oh, I'm not the end of specialty right now, so it's not going to be so good." No, get that out of your head.
Yeah.
It is. That's not it. Like you're going to do well in this race. You're going to do great. Nobody else is nobody's perfect.
It's a better way to set yourself up for success.
Yep, and then you
sure.
won't say it out loud either.
Yeah,
unless you're
exactly.
messing with people's head,
Right.
And that is completely okay.
Yes, once you're in the break.
Yeah,
this
that's
is my
fine.
rest week.
No, but even before, be like, I haven't, whatever you say.
Yeah.
Sure. Brian, we've talked about that. We feel like it's
It's important.
Yeah, when you verbally mislead somebody, like, you know, we're talking in jest right there, but when you verbally mislead somebody, that's where like the ethical boundary for me comes in. When you non-verbally mislead somebody, I kind of feel like, you know, you're looking tired or something like that. I don't feel like that necessarily crosses the ethical boundary. But when you basically are in a sprint with somebody like, hey, you got it, like, don't worry about me, and then you sprint against that person, that's just not cool.
Yeah.
Don't do that ever.
Yeah. That saying I'm not going to sprint against you is bad.
Yeah.
Me saying you'll probably beat, like I just said, you'll probably beat me in the sprint. That's true, but I'm still going to try.
Yeah.
Like, that's different.
Yeah. If we're in the breakaway together, you can say I'm probably gonna. Pete, you're probably going to beat me in the sprint when we get there anyways. So let's just work together.
Yep.
Yeah. Because that's probably what's going to happen.
Yes. Just that I'm not going to attack you or something and you do. That's the worst. But before the race, saying excuses like, I haven't trained much and it's the truth.
Sure.
That's fine. Like say it. Like all those excuses you hear and you say out if you think it's going to improve, but it probably doesn't because everyone else just, like everyone just rolls their eyes, right?
Yeah.
They're like, sure.
Especially when it's Jonathan.
This one's designed for Team Cliff Bar. What's a rule of thumb for pedaling through corners?
Oh,
yes. Good
always
question.
right.
Well, I've clipped my pedal twice.
Yeah. There's
Pete and I actually, one thing. We both, I was watching a race analysis video just this past week, and then I watched the full race video, and both you and I clipped our pedals in the same race together. So we're bros with that. Happens.
I think generally speaking, you want to pedal more often, later and earlier, as soon as you can. And so pedaling more on a course makes it so you don't have to pedal as hard.
Especially when we're talking about turns.
Especially when we're talking about turns. Any real corners, watch everyone else around you. If other people are pedaling through, you probably can. You also make sure you're standing your bike more straight up and pedaling than if you're all the way leaned over. If you're at that 45-degree racer angle, don't pedal.
I have 2 tips for this. There's one reality. So the reality is you will clip your pedal at some point.
Yes.
And you simply can't just. It's not like somebody does something special to be able to pedal through and not clip their pedal. They just know where that limit is and they ride on one side of that line. Right now, the other side of things. Be a stable pedaler, especially through turns. There are a lot of people that when they pedal, their bike will waver side to side when they pedal. And especially when going through a turn, you're leaned into the turn, you're putting out maybe bigger force, that sort of thing. And when you put down force, it's very tempting for us to allow our whole body to get into that pedal stroke. And when you do that, you are not maintaining a consistent pitch, and you're also unweighting your bike and weighting your bike unevenly. So even a tiny little pedal tap is going to throw you on the ground.
That's when you see someone pedal strike and their whole back wheel comes off the ground, like 6 or 12 inches, and then they drop it and usually roll their tire. And
chances are in that scenario, they were pedaling with all of their force and their kind of body leaning in on that inside leg when that was happening. So all their weight was placed onto that. It wasn't stably placed over the wheels. And as a result, when you hit that pedal, it's suddenly a tripod. Rather than it's just like a little tap, it's a tripod and it lifts up everything else because you don't have your weight square over the wheels.
Yeah, and to Jonathan's point, don't pedal super hard through corners. You're pedaling like 200, 300 watts, like just enough to maintain pace. You're never throwing down power, or 100 watts. But the idea is you're just doing barely 10% more than everybody else, and that's what the advantage is. I do hit my pedals frequently, but never hard.
Because you're pedaling softer.
Because I'm pedaling softer, and so it's something that you can capitalize on. You're like, okay, I can't pedal quite as hard through that one, but it's finding that limit and then not pedaling hard so that you're always getting that 100 or 200 watts when everybody else is coasting.
2 other tips. One is you can pedal through the corner all race, and then when it gets really fast, you suddenly can't because you're cornering a lot harder. And 2, watch for the crown of the road. We had this in the video.
Huge point.
But as you go over the crown of the road, it's suddenly going to change, and the road's going to be a lot higher on the inside. And you pedal there, you're going to have a bad day. Where on the other side, if it's like you're on like almost like a banked corner of velodrome, you can pedal a lot longer. And that's all going to depend too on how fast you are. Because when you're going faster, you're probably going to turn outside. You're going to go over that crown. Right. And where on some of the slower laps, you can pedal the whole way through, and you might stay on the inside.
If you have to drift wide, that's a great point. It's probably going to be crowned. If it's off camber, and what that means is if you are basically turning, or if you're riding straight, and then the road is slanted underneath you so that the fall line isn't directly in front of you, but the fall line is off to the side, if it's off camber, you have to pay attention to that and alter your line as a result.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking of the UNR criterium. You can check out the race analysis that we did with that one. And that one has so the turn that we actually clipped our pedals in, it doesn't seem tricky, but it has a crown like you mentioned.
Which turn is that?
The turn before the downhill. It has a crown in it that you don't realize, and you carry a lot of speed
and
in.
you go all the way from the left side of the road all the way
far.
over.
Yep.
Yeah.
So then as a result, you end up crossing that point, like you said. And then there's another turn that's very tricky that we didn't clip our pedals in, but people do basically all the time. But I think the reason we didn't is because we knew to watch it on that one. We take a different line, and we even alter like the pedal strokes. I even subconsciously found that I was pedaling at a specific time coming into that, to be able to time it so that my pedal strokes weren't going to be detrimental to, or likely to hit in that turn.
Yeah, and you can prioritize which leg forward going into a turn so that you have more rotations before your pedal comes down again on one side.
Exactly. So yeah, hopefully that helps. Last one, and this isn't a question, but it just says, I'm going to sit on Jonathan's wheel all day on Saturday. Hi, Griffin. That's your name? Please don't do that.
So this is what you do, because it's happened to me. Jonathan, go off the back.
Yeah,
You've
sure.
got pop. I'm serious.
Sure.
Do that over and over to them. Like, give a little bit of gap, and like they can come around. And if not, you attack them, and then they got to work too.
So yeah, you got to work for it, Griffin.
And if you don't do it this race, it's going to happen forever.
It's true.
So once you just do it.
Throw the gauntlet.
Yeah, it's mutual assured destruction. So if you it'll happen forever. You got to just do it. And you're poppy enough to come back on.
I was going to say that's my strength.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to go off the back? Let's do this.
Sure. Yeah. If you want to, Griffin, go on ahead. So cool. All right. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Remember, you can submit your questions at trainerroad.com/podcast. You can subscribe to this podcast too. I know there are a lot of people that just listen to the podcast without subscribing. You should totally subscribe, because in that way you can get it. And I'm going to throw something out here. There's going to be more podcast content coming soon. So
like different podcasts coming?
Different podcasts coming. So stay tuned for that. That's why you'll want to subscribe, so you can be in tune with that. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. So then you can see, because we have a YouTube video going up every single week, thanks to Tucker and his awesome work. Or every single day, not every week.
Yeah.
And check out our blog. You can subscribe to that too, because we have articles every single day, training articles. And when we make these articles, we sit down and we think, how can we make people faster? And that's how we write these things. So it's not like just, it's not just blathering on about stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Like the podcast.
It's all productive.
Just kidding.
Yeah. All productive. And if you want to get faster, check out Trainer Road right up there behind us. And we'll talk to you all next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.